IB Nation, Notre Dame fans across the globe, across this land, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Friday, September 12th. That's Sean Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll. Notre Dame tomorrow, a little over 20, for about 30 hours, 30 and a half hours from now, we'll be kicking off against Texas A&M. It is a big game for the Irish and for the Aggies. And we're going to talk a little bit about that game today. But as part of the RTCF show that Sean and I are going to do together, we're going to talk a little recruiting. We're going to talk a little Notre Dame team, and then we're obviously going to talk about college football. Our recruiting topic today, Sean, is the massive weekend of visitors that are expected. Normally, when we get a big visit list like that early in the week, we get the list and we know who's coming. And there's usually like 10, 12, 13 cancellations. I think I counted like 3. One of them is a commit who couldn't come, had some things going on. You know, Jacoby Clapper's not on the list. But, man, this is a massive list of not just the committed kids. If you just took I think all but 4 committed players in the 2026 class and then 2 of the 3 commits in the 2027 class are going to be here this weekend. Even if you just remove that, it's a massive list of players. We'll dive into that. Part 2 of our show today will be our team topic. And Sean and I are going to go through our 5 players. We each have a list of 5. Shocker. There's a lot of the same guys on the list. But we're going to go over our 5 players on offense, 5 players on defense, who we think are most important to this weekend's game against Texas A&M. And then part 3, Sean, we have several different topics that we want to talk about, but we decided we're going to kind of settle in on looking at some coaches on the hot seat and where they are right now, some games that are in front of them either this weekend or upcoming weekends where their futures are going to be decided over the next few weeks, in my opinion. Either A, some of them might get let go because obviously we know that coaches get fired a lot more during the season. Some of them may just fall behind so great that they can't recover from it. And then there's a couple coaches we have. You know, I made breakfast for Ange this morning, right, Sean? And I'm making, just something simple, scrambled eggs and toast, right? So you turn the burner on, you put the pan on there, and it's like right at first, it's not a hot pan, but it's starting to warm up a little bit. Like the burner just got turned on for a couple coaches in the last couple weeks, or is could be turned on. We're going to talk about them as well. So that'll be our college football topic. And then if we have some time, Sean's got another college football topic that he and I have discussed. I think it'd be really a fascinating conversation for us to have that we'll get into. If we can't talk about it this week because of time, then we'll talk about it next week, because it's not so much a conversation about like this weekend's games. It's just more so the state of college football, which is very interesting. So I'm ready to get rocking and rolling, Sean. But, hey, we're going to kick this thing off with recruiting, Sean. Obviously, here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. We're going to get going here on our recruiting topic because Notre Dame goes into this weekend's game with a huge matchup, obviously. Notre Dame taking on Texas A&M. But it's very clear that Notre Dame is trying to get the majority of their big visitors in for the 2 big home night games against Texas A&M and USC on October 18th. And this weekend is huge. This is one of the more impressive group of visitors that I've ever seen Notre Dame put together. You probably have to go back. There was a game I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 2011 against USC. Remember that? It was like Zach Banner and like just this monster list of players that they had on campus. I think this might even be more impressive than that. That list might have had a few more players on it of non-committed players, but this list is more impressive, just a high-level talent across the board. This is a huge weekend for Notre Dame, Sean, on the recruiting trail.
And I think what's so unique, I think makes it different, is that you're coming into this class or this recruiting weekend not really having to recruit to close a class. I mean, you're always recruiting your guys until they officially sign in December. But to come in and feel comfortable about where you sit with the 26 guys, and now you can really customize this visit for the 27, 28 kids, and then allow the 26 class to kind of help you and assist as they ingratiate themselves to the other recruits and other visitors on campus. So I think that sets this visit apart. I think it's something that they almost are replicating from that June 13th weekend. So they made the right decision to get all of those great players in one visit to allow them to see what they can do together. Like, this is what it will be like together if you guys come to Notre Dame. And if they start to recreate that or replicate that for some of these game visits for the 27 and 28 kids, it can have profound effect. And then lastly, Marcus Freeman spoke about in his teleconference call, recruiting always increases when the product on the field looks a certain way. He knows that. He knows the pressure of not only to win for the sake of his team and their goals for the season, but to continue the hot streak that they're on in recruiting is going to go a long way with all of these big time recruits in the stands, seeing them play well on Saturday night against a quality opponent.
Shaun, when you look at this weekend, I mean, you do the visit list was put together because of the product that's been on the field. But the product on the field now is going to be what largely determines whether or not they're able to get a lot of these kids in the 2027 class, which I think adds even more to this. But as we kind of dive into the specifics of this class, and that was a great overview, Shaun. I think this weekend, when I look at this weekend, Shaun, success this weekend is going to largely determine how good this class can be in 2027. And I've seen people say, well, that's a huge list. How are they going to handle kind of talking to everybody? Because I think when a lot of people look at the list for this weekend, they see, well, man, there's 20 some commits. You got to spend your time with them. And I'm like, kind of, but the reality is like Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton and Caden Finley and Teddy Gerard and Noah Grubbs aren't coming in town this weekend to continue to be loved by the Notre Dame coaching staff. They're coming in town this weekend. They want to get back to Notre Dame, see each other. Obviously, they're going to spend time with the coaches, but they're also coming in to recruit. Like, that's the thing. Say, how are they going to handle all these recruits coming on campus? And I'm like, well, you've got the 10 assistant coaches. You've got Marcus Freeman. You've got the recruiting staff, starting with the GM, Mike Martin, but then, Carter Allman and Jordan Blake and Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa and that whole staff. You've got analysts. You've got GAs. You've got all these different people that are building relationships. So, like, if Mike Denbrock is over here talking to, Preston Frizel and Ian Premer, then guess who's over here talking to Jack Brown and the other tight ends? It's Harris Biven. If Mike Mickens is over here talking to this 4 or 5 DBs, then you may have, Coach Codlin over here talking to the other DBs, or Chris Ash talking to other DBs, or Carter Allman talking to the other DBs, or Jordan Blake talking to the other DBs. Like that's the reality of it is, Al Washington's talking to the 2026 D-line commits, while Nick Sebastian's over there, talking to, DJ Jacobs and his brother and Devin Robertson and Braden Parks and all the guys that are on campus. So, but guess who else is talking to them when they're not, it's going to be who's talking to DJ Jacobs, David Jacobs, who's a stud 2025 player. Well, it's going to be Ebenezer Utade and Rodney Dunham. Who's going to be spending time with Devin Robertson and Braden Parks? Tiki Hola. Like that's how this goes. I mean, that's part of it. And you nailed it. Like, it's about their own brotherhood, but then seeking out players to bring into the conversation. And then it's important for them to have conversations, because one of the things that'll happen after the visit, the coaches and the recruiting staff should, and I would assume that they do, are going to follow up with the committed players and say, how did it go with such and such recruit? Oh, it's great, coach. I mean, and they're looking for intel, like, what did he say to you? But the other thing that's part of this conversation is, how did he fit? Like, do you think, you guys know what we're looking for? How do you think he fit? And there have been times in the past, I haven't heard that often with this staff, but I did hear it previously under the previous coaching staff, where they would drop kids who just didn't conduct themselves away during a visit, and it really rubbed the current commits the wrong way. Like, coach, man, like this isn't a guy that you want to be a part. And it's not so much like, they're getting clicky and stuff, but, guy will come in here and act a fool, or, do things where you're just like, dude, this guy is not worth your time. That's happened before. And so it's a process of building those relationships, building those bonds that are going to go a long way towards how this 2027 class gets filled out. But also the product on the field is going to tell us that as well, Shaun. You've already done 3 stories that you've published at Irish Breakdown on the premium message board. There's some other stories that I know you're working on. You're going to save some for after the visit. But one of the things we constantly hear about from kids is like, I want to see the environment, but it's also, I want to see how they perform on the field this weekend is going to be a big part of how this weekend goes.
one interesting point, I was talking to Aiden Pouncey, and Aiden Pouncey, because a lot of these kids, we assume with all of the great kids that they have committed in the 26 class, they're so good that we assume that they're all experiencing team success, right? And you really talk to kids and you realize, oh man, their teams haven't gotten out to a great start like the majority of these guys, right? They're on good teams. And Aiden Pouncey is one of those young men. So I was just talking to him, and it wasn't until he mentioned it that I realized. He was like, yeah, man, I'm just excited to actually experience a game day. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is his first game day experience. And he's not alone in the 26th class. I believe Jonas Walton, this would be his first game day experience. I think both running backs are going to have their first game day experience, if I'm not mistaken. Did Javian come in last year?
I don't know that he came in for a game. I know he came in for the spring game.
He came for the spring game, but not
a different animal. Yeah.
Right. So I think you have a lot of these guys, and that speaks to the excitement that you were talking about. They're just as excited as they're committed, but they're just as excited because this is their first time experiencing game day in Notre Dame. So that will permeate from the commits to the visitors, and like you said, the assistant coaches and the collaborative effort. But that just stood out to me. That fact, like
those two running backs did not visit last fall. You are correct.
Yeah. So, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the feedback after. And like you said, they want to see the environment. Most of them are excited to meet the fans, talk to the fans, see how the fans interact with the players. Several players are like, I'm looking at my position coach and how they prepare before the game and how they interact with the players before the game. And then once the game starts, they're definitely going to be watching how their positions are used. One big-time receiver flat out told me, I want to see explosive plays. That's the offense I come out of in high school. I want to see explosive plays in the passing game, and that's what he'll be looking for. So they are focused. They know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they're looking for, and recruiting is just really coming into a new age. I think there's a lot more information out there for recruits, for their families. Devin Robertson was very frank and honest with me and saying that I really haven't personally spoken to the staff. He's excited to actually get to campus and to continue to build with the coaches because his dad took over communication with the coaches once he started practice for his high school season. He had spoken to the staff up to that, and once he started preparation for his high school season, Coach Washington was communicating consistently with his dad. And so that's how I was
going to ask you about that, Shaun, because you're like, he hasn't talked to the staff. And I was like, is that a problem? That's a father being a good advisor to his child, saying like, look, we're going to have this structure. And it's good that Notre Dame has continued, because there's some coaches like, well, if I can't talk to the kid, I'm whatever, I'm not going to talk to him anymore. But that's smart by Washington to continue that. But I'm glad you continued explaining that.
That's why he's excited, because that's why he's excited, because he's like, I had this break where I wasn't able to talk to the coaches. Now I get to see them face to face and continue to build, but there's always been communication.
Yeah. I wish more parents did that, to be honest with you. During times of the year, say, hey, listen, like my kid is focused on his team right now. You got something to say, you call and talk to me. I wish, just for a time, it doesn't have to be for the next 5 months, but just for a time to allow their kids a second to just kind of breathe. And then coaches who don't respect that gives you a sense of who you do and don't want, your kid to play for. Because like, look, I asked you this, you weren't willing to respect that, And so I think that's good. So I was happy to see that. So let's talk a little bit about this list, Shaun. And go into some of the players that are going to be visiting Notre Dame this weekend, and there's players at all positions, but there's 4 positions in my opinion. Well, first of all, I think it's huge that the majority of the 2026 commits aren't going to be here this weekend, and the ones that don't have valid reasons, like I know Joey O'Brien and Grayson McHugh are going to be. They have games on Saturday. Kari Adams has a game on Saturday. I'm not sure about Jacoby Clapper, and I believe Charlie Tom has a game on Saturday. And then, like with Elijah Golden, there's just travel, and there's some different reasons why. But he also committed a lot later So a lot of these kids have already they've been planning this since they committed this summer. So at least 20 of the 2027 kids, and then 2 of the 3 2027 commits, the only exception, I believe, being Sean Kraft, the snapper, are going to be on campus this weekend. And I think events like that, as long as the game goes well, those are always good bonding experiences that just solidifies these events. But the backfire can be if you go out there and you don't perform well and you get your butt whooped. That can have, well, now they're all seeing it and talking about it together. And, but it adds to the importance of the game for the committed players. Not that if they lose, they're going to lose a bunch of recruits, but it can start to say like, interesting. And so performing well this weekend will be important.
You can say that again and again and again until you decide to become a part of this church family. Like it's like the invitation. Like, yes, continue to say it until it becomes true and it manifests. But I just really, the excitement. We sit here and we analyze, and a bye week and anxiety starts to hit. And you're just ready for the game, and these kids, like, the excitement around these kids, hearing multiple kids say, I can't wait to see Notre Dame dominate. Like, they are expecting Notre Dame to respond. It's almost like the Miami game didn't deter them from what they think about Notre Dame and what's being built. And they're coming with the expectation to see a really good product on the field. So I think that's interesting as well, which goes to your point. Like, the players would decide along with the coaches, but the expectation is probably just as high, if not higher, for these recruits than it is within the fan base that might be experiencing a little bit of anxiety coming off of a loss.
Shaun, you and I have talked about this. Recruits rarely react as emotionally as fans do. And that's not an insult to fans. These players are not invested in it the same way that the same way that a fan who's been a fan of the team for 20 years is invested in it. Meaning they don't, not that it's not important to them and it doesn't matter to them, but more so they're just looking at it differently than you would if you're just a fan who's looking to just see the results of what your team does or doesn't do in the game. And so it doesn't have that's why you don't see like mass exodus from teams every time a team loses the way that fans think that they are. But it requires some level of consistency. Let's talk about some of the players, because, Shaun, it is impressive, the list of players that are going to be on campus this weekend. Let's start off with wide receiver, because I think this is the one that has a lot of people's attention, because it's just I think there's a lot of people that are encouraged by the class that Mike Brown put together in 2026. He finished as strong as any coach on the staff, in my opinion, because for a while there were a lot of people complaining about what the receiver class is going to look like, even though I still felt that they were underrating some of the early commits, especially Bubba Frazier, who I'm a big fan of as a player. But kind of looking at it and saying, like, is he really that big of is he a good enough recruiter to really bring in the big time players? And is he a good enough recruiter for Notre Dame to consistently go out there and do this and consistently go out there and get top players and those type of things. And so I was curious what this first weekend was going to look like at his position. And I don't know that it's possible to have a better group of players going to be on campus this weekend. And I'll have you kind of talk about some of the individual players, but let me just list them off real quick. Number one is Quentin Burrell from Mount Carmel, Chicago. Big time must-get recruit for Notre Dame. He's in your backyard. You want to talk about Notre Dame fit? I don't know that there's a better Notre Dame fit in the class than Quentin Burrell. And I would even put him over Julius Jones Jr. simply because he lives an hour and a half away, where Julius Jones Jr. lives in Florida. That's one of the differences. High academic kid, high character kid, great work ethic. And, oh, by the way, big time talent at wide receiver. He'll be here this weekend. I know we have a story on the Irish Breakdown boards at irishbreakdown.com that Shaun did interviewing Quentin for this game. Consensus top 50 recruit. IB has him graded as a top 50 recruit. He'll be on campus. Julius Jones Jr. will also be on campus, Shaun. And he's ranked as the number 57 player in the country by ESPN, number 59 by the On3 Rivals Network. I have him as a top 50 recruit. I think he's a borderline 5-star player. I think Julius Jones Jr. is special. It's important to get him back on campus again this weekend and get him more and more acclimated to Notre Dame and make sure that you can sell it, because he does have an attraction to the school because of his dad. He's not one of those kids that's got I don't want to go to Notre Dame because of my dad. There is an interest there, but you're not going to get him because his dad went here. You're going to have to sell him on the vision for him. I think that's an important one. You've got Monshin Sales that's coming on campus this weekend. He's another top 50 consensus player. 247 has him ranked number 11 overall. Rivals on 3 has him ranked number 20 overall. ESPN has him ranked number 36 overall. Easy top 50 player on our breakdown, and is incredibly high 5-star ceiling. Big time player, in-state kid, but not a kid that's ever really expressed that much interest in Notre Dame. So this is a big one for there, because you are hoping to win him over this weekend with the environment. And then a couple other players that are on campus this weekend, Shaun. One is Anthony Roberts, AJ Roberts from North Carolina. Talented player. He's a top 160. He's the number 160 overall player by On3. A little bit of an under-the-radar type of prospect, Shaun, but a talented kid as well. Has offers from Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, Penn State. A very good offer list. And he's 6'2", so he brings some size. I think they definitely need size in this recruiting class. There's no question about that. And then there's a very intriguing 2028 player coming on campus this weekend, Shaun, a kid that you and I saw up close and personal this summer. And his name is Jordan McKinley, also from Chicago. Where does he go in Chicago?
Loyola Academy.
He's at Loyola? Okay.
Yeah, he's at Loyola.
He's an intriguing player, because when we saw him, we're like, who's this kid? Like, he looks like a 26 kid. He looks like a rising senior. He's a put-together young man. And they're like, that's a 28 kid? Are you serious? Very talented player. So this group of receivers, Shaun, that's going to be on campus this weekend, that I don't know that this and the next group we're going to talk about are the two groups where Notre Dame has to make the biggest splash this weekend.
Well, I want to start with Jordan McKinley, who's in the 28 class. I talked to this young man leading into the visit, and he flat out said this is his third time. He's been to 2 games at Notre Dame Stadium already.
And he was at Invasion
Chicago kid
this summer.
He was at Invasion. This is his 3rd game day. And he was like, yo, there's nothing like Notre Dame on a game day. So he gives me the vibe like he is already putting Notre Dame as his top school. He's visited 3 times already. Big time talent, just physically well put together. But I want to talk to what you pointed out. I think the 5-man haul for Mike Brown, the way he closed in the 2026 class, was just as impressive as any other coach on the staff. But I think it fit a need. And I think this is something I love from Mike Brown. He went out in 26 and got what was needed, which was a lot more speed and quickness and ability with the ball after the catch to make explosive plays. And now you're talking about literally in the 27 class, 4 top 150 wide receivers. We have to research. This is when I wish we had Luke Samoji around to research. When the last day 4 top 150 wide receivers for a recruiting weekend? You probably have to go back to the days of the banquets with Lou Holtz. But Monshin Sales, Lawrence North, pretty much a 5-star. And then, like you said, you sneak Julius Jones in there, that's 3 top 50 wide receivers on campus. So Quentin Burrell was at the Invasion. We both loved him. Burrell, to me, is that perfect fit, and I'll tell you why. Notre Dame has struggled in a sense, probably since having consistent play at the boundary position. Like, they've had to go out and find guys to play the boundary. And he is, for me, a kid that can come in at 6'3", might even get up to 6'4" by the time he leaves Notre Dame, immediately go to the boundary, because within the Mount Carmel offense, the way they do it is he is solo or single just about 90% of the snaps in their offense. Sometimes he's single to the field. The majority of the time he is single to the boundary. So he's used to working in that space And for him, he is an elite, in my opinion. We talked about some things we wanted him to improve upon. And I can't wait for you to watch his film as the season goes on, because the things you pointed out, I'm like, yo, he worked on that. Like, he is really good at every facet of the route tree. He's able to create separation even at his size, knows how to play the game, knows how to play the position. And I think what we've seen with Elijah Burris and what we've seen with guys like Jerome Bettis Jr., like at that position of wide receiver, it is invaluable to know how to play the game, like the fundamentals, and then allow your athleticism to kind of build and catch up with you as you grow. But this kid is put together. He can run, great hands. He doesn't catch with his body, really good with the ball after he catches it. And he's clutch. He's clutch. Big time program. He immediately came in as a true freshman in a big time program and made an impact. That doesn't happen at Chicago, Mark Carmen. So that just shows you the pedigree, NFL pedigree. His father played for Northwestern as well. Marshawn Sales, like you said, the tape is incredible. Just an absolute bananas athlete.
Rare.
That goes without saying. Just rare.
And he's super raw, Shaun. Absolutely. That's the thing. He's still very raw, and he's a dominant talent.
Yeah. I think Julius Jones Jr. is someone to watch this weekend because of has been created at Notre Dame with the NFL legacy. Malik Zaire is on the ground. He's already ran into like 15 former Notre Dame players. He expects it to be crazy this weekend with Notre Dame alumni. So he's going to be around that. He's going to see the Notre Dame greats. He's going to feel
and
that
the love
vibe.
his dad's going to get from those people.
Dad's going to absolutely. So he's going to come to understand how important Notre Dame was to him. And then, AJ Roberts, I have to be honest, I just really dug into AJ Roberts this week on film. And I'm like, yo, I wouldn't be mad if he snuck in there. If they take 2, we think they're probably going to take 2 and 27. Maybe they sneak to 3 if they really like somebody.
I think they'll definitely take at least 3. I do.
Yeah, okay.
I think 3.
We were thinking 2 at first.
Yeah.
So if they take
receiver,
3,
like overall receiver, just out. Yeah, I think 3 is the number they're going to look at.
Yeah. If they take 3, then without question, if he's one of those 3, you feel like, oh man, we got a top 150 wide receiver. And this is a big weekend for Mike Brown. It really is. It's a big weekend for Mike Brown. And I do think there will be opportunities for big plays in the passing game. I do feel that way. And I was encouraged even listening to Jaden Greathouse talk the way that he talked. It's funny because some Texas A&M media people tried to take his his bite and use it as bulletin board material as if he was, being derogatory about their secondary. But if that's what you have to use, then go ahead and use it.
I'll tell you, Shaun, when I look at this receiver list, man, first of all, if they have a good show, if they get a good show to watch this weekend, that's going to bode well for Notre Dame's ability to win this football game, obviously. But this is the kind of potential receiver class that they have, where it truly completely changes the narrative of where you are as a program. Completely changes the narrative. It's funny, Trev and I were talking about some of the FanDuel numbers yesterday, and we're looking at like the some of the numbers. Like CJ Carr right now, the if you're doing like prop bets at FanDuel, right now CJ Carr is only at 205 yards against the Texas A&M secondary. You talk about looking at some other things. Trying to find the receivers. Malachi Fields is at 40.5 yards. Jaden Greathouse 28.5 yards. But they got 2 guys for A&M higher than that. Because again, the perception is still that Notre Dame's just not a team that throws football. I mean, I understand it. There's no reason to change that perception. Notre Dame it's not like the one big play and the one great catch from Malachi Fields like all of a sudden changed the narrative about Notre Dame's ability to throw the football. But it does speak volumes to the perception that like this is still not a team that's going to really throw the football at a high level. I think you start getting some players like they got in 2026. Caden Finley's that kind of player, in my opinion. I think that that Bubba Frazier's got a chance to be that kind of player. Braden Robinson's that really dynamic after the catch kind of guy. We've talked about Dylan Faison and Devin Fitzgerald and all that. But like outside of Caden Finley, I don't know that any of them are like the elite top 50, top 75 caliber players. They're just really good football players. They're Jordan Faisons, not necessarily Will Fullers, right? And so when I look at this group coming up, though, now you've got a chance to add more elite talent to a group that already has a lot of skills that you needed. You needed the dynamic playmakers. You needed the speed upgrade. You needed the shiftiness. Now, because you got that 5-man class, a year after getting what's gonna turn out to be a very underrated 3-man class with Scrap Richardson and Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., is you've got a chance of bringing another probably 3-man class that if you can get the right players, and honestly, the right players are all on campus this weekend, Shaun, you've got a chance to have a truly program-changing receiver haul. And that may sound hyperbolic, but it's not at all. If you can get 2 of the 3 between Quentin Burrell, Julius Jones Jr., and Monshan Sales, you have a receiver class that can go up against anybody. And if you can somehow get all 3 of those guys, in my opinion, Shaun, you have a chance to have a receiver class that people look at and say, I don't know that anybody can beat that. And you combine that with this current 2026 class, which has a lot of Z's, a lot of slots, and then you have a couple guys that can be boundaries and pure outside guys, and all of a sudden you're saying, okay, now Notre Dame is putting themselves in the position where if you can't get big-time play out of this group, you're now the problem, not the talent in the room. You know, like you're the problem as coaches, and I don't think that's going to be the case for Notre Dame. That's what's at stake for Notre Dame, in my opinion, with this recruiting class. And the fact that they're getting all those guys on campus together is huge, because now they get to talk together. They get to meet each other. Hey, man, let's go. You know, let's maybe build a connection where they start talking about wanting to go to school together. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's what you can do. Some people say, well, don't you want to spend all your time? No, because football players don't, a lot of times, the ones that fit at Notre Dame don't want to have to just be, it's all about the red carpet for me, and it's me. That's important. I'm not going to pretend like that's not important, because you want to know how they're going to use you, how they view you, but it's also about, but what am I going to play with? Who am I going to play with? What kind of people am I going to play with? You got Teddy Gerard on campus, who's a top 50 recruit in their class at quarterback. It's as big of a weekend as you can imagine. And I feel like this weekend is going to have a major say on whether or not Notre Dame can land the kind of just program-changing receiver class that they need. That's similar to the back-to-back haul that we saw in 15 and 16. I mean, that changed the game a little bit for Notre Dame for a few years, because in back-to-back classes, you landed Equanimity St. Brown, Javon McKinley, Kevin Stefferson, C.J. Sanders, Chase Claypool, Miles Boykin, and I'm forgetting one guy. No, that's the group, because the first class was Boykin, St. Brown, Jalen Guyton, and C.J. Sanders, and then the next year you got Claypool, Javon McKinley, and Kevin Stefferson, I believe is how that class got to put together. And at different times, all those guys were the dudes at Notre Dame. Obviously, Boykin, EQ was the guy in 16, and then in 17, nobody was really the dude in 17 throwing the football, because that was a different animal. But then 18, it's Boykin is kind of the guy. Claypool's an ascending guy. Stefferson obviously had the great freshman year that was impactful. Then in 19, Chase Claypool has this breakout dominant season. Then in 2020, Javon McKinley steps up, and he's your kind of go-to guy on a playoff team. Like, that changed the game a little bit for Notre Dame at receiver. And you had Boykin was the third round draft pick. Claypool was the second round draft pick. EQ was drafted in the NFL. C.J. Sanders is a guy that wasn't a drafted guy, but turned out to be a dynamic return guy at Notre Dame. I think he tied Rocket, in number of kick and punt returns in his career, I believe. Or maybe he's like one behind Rocket, but he was close. Obviously, Javon McKinley's injuries kind of kept him from getting to that point, but still, he was your leading receiver on a playoff team. And I think this 2-year haul can be that. And I think this weekend is going to go a long way towards telling us if they have a chance to kind of make a strong impression. I feel like if you can't come out of this weekend a major player for these three kids, then whoever you're not a major player for, it's going to be tough to be in that. And I think that's a lot of pressure, but that's how I feel about. I'm not saying you got to land him, you got to be number one. You just got to be a player for him. And like if you come out this weekend and you're not the top school for Quentin Burrell or a top school for Julius Jones Jr., or if you don't start getting more attention from Monchin Sales, and you're gonna have to know, like, hey, look, we're just not gonna get those guys. Or like I'm all three of them. It's not, but like each one individually, you're gonna get a sense of that.
One of the interesting things that I think is you just pointed something out, which took my mind back to the Irish invasion and the conversation I had with Quentin Burrell in the immediate aftermath. And I remember the buzz coming to the Rivals camp of Teddy Gerard, right? And then he gets the offer from Notre Dame along with Peyton Houston. And of course, we know he ends up committing to Notre Dame. So I reached out to Quentin after he commits, and I said, yo, did you remember, anything in particular at the Irish invasion about Teddy? Did you remember catching a pass from him? He was like, I honestly didn't even know that he was there. Like, man, I was just so focused on, doing what I had to do. He was like, but I saw the buzz coming. He was like, this is how recruiting has changed. You talk about how that class was put together with Stefferson and the crew. It's totally different, right? These kids watch each other, their clips, their film, whatever they post on TikTok, Instagram, coming out of these camps and coming out of these high school games. They know more about each other and want to know more about each other and want to be connected, right? So that moment, he was going to make it his business to do more work on Teddy Gerard. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know too much right now.
Because he didn't actually throw at the camp, like the same one that Quentin was at. He threw, I think, like the day before in like a private type of part of the camp. But
so it was like,
it is an interesting point.
Like, I don't remember like meeting him, but I did hear about him at the Rivals camp. I did see the stories about him at the Rivals camp, and then I did see that he committed. Yeah. Now I'm ready to go do my homework. This is the mindset of these youngsters now. Like, they're aware.
Sean, when we were coming up as recruits, or as high school players, or when you first started really covering recruiting and being around this, you couldn't really go look up a guy. I mean, you didn't have Huddle like you do now. You didn't have all these camps that you do now. You didn't have, you had recruiting services. So you knew if a guy was ranked high, you knew his offers were, but you didn't know, kind of player he was. And so I do think it's one of the blessings of our modern technologies, because it does allow, and then how could you connect with a guy? You had to call him on the phone, the phone that was connected to the wall with the cord that prevented how far away go away from the phone you could go. It's a different animal back then. You know what I mean? Like, if you were going to call some kid, hey, I want to get to know Teddy Gerard down in Georgia, that's an expensive phone call back in the day. It's a different animal now. And I do think that's a good thing, and it certainly has changed the game in recruiting, but there's nothing like face-to-face time. Nothing. And that's what's going to be big about this weekend. So, look, receiver's not the only class that's loaded with big-time players on campus this weekend, Sean. Mike Mickens, once again, credit to Mike Mickens and Jordan Blake and Carter Allman and the staff. They've got a really, really good group of DBs coming on campus this weekend as well, Sean. Let's just kind of quickly go over that list. A lot of 26. Obviously, the 26. You're going to actually only get, I think, 3 of the 26 commits. You're going to have Aiden Pouncey on campus, Chaz Smith on campus, and Nick Reddish on campus. It was hilarious. I was reading an update from On3 the other day, and it's funny some of the things that they view as updates. They had some like updates of Southern players, and they're like, Chaz Smith is locked into Notre Dame, not talking to anybody else. I'm like, how is this an update? A committed kid still committed and not looking to not be committed. Like, okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that. But, he's completely locked in. Aiden Pouncey, you've talked to. He's looking forward to getting into this game. What's funny is his older brother's been on game day visits before, but he hasn't obviously been here. I think his older brother was like, I think he was part of one of the USC. No, he would have been 16. So, but anyway, the point is here, Sean, you have some very talented DBs coming on campus with the committed players, and I want to go over that list because it is a big-time list. Player to keep an eye on that you guys should get to know is Xavier Hassan. Hey, look, Shaun, we talk about this, man. Notre Dame's trying to get into some certain states to be successful, and one of those states is North Carolina. And this is a big-time talent from North Carolina. We've had Brian Smith on the show. Brian Smith and I have talked privately about Xavier Hassan. He saw him, I forget which camp it was, but it was one of the big elite camps. He saw Xavier Hassan work out. Said he was a very talented player. Brian also talked a lot about this kid's got legitimate interest in Notre Dame. He's a top 100 recruit. Rivals has him ranked number 60 overall. 247 has him ranked number 46 overall, and then ESPN has him ranked number 54 overall. Each of the three outlets rank him in the top 3 in the state of North Carolina. But he's a kid from North Carolina. He's a national recruit. This is a top 100 player. Very talented player, 6 foot, 180, athletic, smart, physical. He's everything that Mike Mickens wants in a DB. He's going to be on campus this weekend. I've seen other people report this. This is what our intel has told us. I think Notre Dame's the team to beat for Xavier Hassan right now. And so I'm curious how things are going to go for him this weekend. In obviously getting a lot of love for Mike Mickens and the staff. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that you'll see really get a push from the Notre Dame staff this weekend. So keep an eye on him. Another player that's on campus this weekend, Shaun, is Josh Dobson, big-time 5-star kid. I believe he's a consensus 5-star range. These sites do the silliness. They slowly add 5 stars to the ranking. So like Manchin Sales is ranked number 11 by 247, but he's not a 5-star because they haven't done their updated 5-star, push to get clicks. But he's the number 5 player in the country by Rivals, the number 6 player in the country by ESPN, and the number 7 player by 247. 247 Sports has him as the number 7 player in the country, but not a 5-star. As I said, it's a joke, but he's a 5-star player. We have him as a 5-star player. He's from the state of South Carolina. He's fast, athletic, long, super talented, as good of a corner as you're going to have in high school football this year, regardless of class. Notre Dame is sort of not playing catch up because it's not like they got on him late, but there's other schools he likes more that he holds in high regard because he's never been to Notre Dame. This is going to be his first trip to Notre Dame. This is, again, kind of like with Manchin Sales. This is the visit, Shaun, that's going to give you a sense of, are they going to be a player for him? A couple other kids on campus. Ace Alston is going to be on campus this weekend. He's a talented player as well. He's a guy that Notre Dame's been on for a while. He's an Ohio kid. He's from Cincinnati. The staff likes him. He's a top 150 caliber kid. 247 has a number 118 overall. ESPN is a number 146 overall. He's a talented player that Notre Dame. He's been on campus multiple times so far. So that's a kid that has a little bit more of a relationship with Notre Dame. Another player on campus this weekend, Josiah Molden. It's a cornerback from West Lynn, Oregon. Another top 150 caliber player. Rivals has him at number 118 overall. Rivals on 3. 247 has him ranked number 145 overall. A guy that I think can play some corner, could maybe play a little bit of safety. He's going to be on campus this weekend. Jalen Hill is another 27 kid that's going to be on campus. It's been linked a lot as far as having some interest in Notre Dame. He's from St. John Bosco. ESPN has him ranked number 85 overall. 247 is number 199 overall. He's that Mike Mickens fit at corner, Shaun. He's 6'3", from St. John Bosco, former teammate, obviously, of Kingston Viliama Asa. He'll be on campus this weekend. Jaden Carey is another player that's going to be on campus this weekend, Shaun, another cornerback that's going to be on campus this weekend. He's from St. Thomas Aquinas, teammate of Julius Jones Jr. And then there's a very interesting 2028 kid that's going to be on campus this weekend also, Shaun, as we get into just the corners. And you know what, let's throw in Tavares Harrington as well to this conversation, because I think he's a guy that's, could play safety, could play corner. He's a very talented player from Illinois. We'll throw him and we'll just kind of do secondary instead of just corners. But Phoenix Evans is a 2028 cornerback from Don Bosco in New Jersey, who's a very talented young player that I think is going to end up being a top 50 to 75 overall player as we get into the 28 rankings. He's a guy that's been linked with Notre Dame for a little bit, and the fact that they're bringing him on campus this weekend is huge. And then also we talked about is a player from not too far from where you're from, Shaun, Tavares Harrington, who is a very talented player from the state of Illinois. Again, talk about the Mike Mickens fits from Mount Carmel, teammate of Quentin Burrell. Mike Mickens loves length. Tavares Harrington is 6'3", 180, long, can play corner, can play safety. Reminds me a lot of Joey O'Brien from a versatility standpoint in that he can play corner. Maybe he projects better at safety, but you just want to get that kid and you'll figure out where you're going to put him later. That's as impressive of a secondary group as you're going to have on campus anywhere this season, Shaun. And it just speaks to the volumes of what Mike Mickens and the staff is doing when it comes to recruiting the defensive backfield.
And Xavier Hassan and Josh Dobson have a relationship. So, that can go a long way as well in their recruitment. Tavares Harrington, just starting with him, teammate of Quinn Burrell. The interesting thing about him, I don't see a lot of high school coaches that allow a defensive back to travel. I went to that game last Friday. They played Chicago Bears that has a really good 27 wide receiver. He's like a top 250 kid. And Chicago St. Rita. They have a top 250 kid, and he just followed him wherever he went. If he went to the boundary, he followed him. If he went to the field, he followed him. And I was like, yo, I'm talking to one of the retired coaches that coached the freshman team for a lot of time. And he was just like, yo, this kid is absolutely amazing. And so I think the versatility and the length, like you said, is what Mickens loves about Tavares Harrington. So to have him and Quentin Burrell on campus, that game is going to be very impactful, I believe. But the top guys for me, I think the top three guys that are going to be on campus, that's huge to get those top three guys on campus at the same time. And once again, recruiting has changed. These kids talk, right? We had a big time recruit 2 years ago that when we mentioned that, they said, man, who am I going to be playing with? We kind of poo-pooed it, but now it's like that was the direction that recruiting was kind of going because of the access that these young men have to one another. Like, they want to know. They want to come to visits. Notre Dame's 26 class and the success is all about, let's take, for instance, Ian Primer. He flat out said, I don't know if I was leaning that way before I came to the visit, but after being around all of those great players, I want to take that challenge. I want to play with other great players. And so when you get Joshua Dobson and Xavier Hassan, Ace Austin all together on one visit, it can't hurt. It can't hurt. It can only benefit from it, right? And so Notre Dame just has to take up their end of the bargain on the field. And I'll be honest, I'm interested in getting your take on this. The operation is a little bit different than it was previously. And to be fair and give context, the operation had a different purpose under the previous GM, right? There was a need to do things a certain way, and Chad did it excellent to get Notre Dame to a certain point. And now there's been a shift, and I think the shift is where now Notre Dame understands we have top guys and they're interested, and now we have to look like a top guy, a top program, and present ourselves as a top program to these top guys when they come in and give them that type of experience. And I think Notre Dame, as a school, as a staff, as the players, as the committed players, they're doing an incredibly collaborative, giving an incredible collaborative effort moving forward. I mean, it's not me saying things are better in any way, shape, or form.
Very different.
Definitely see the shift and the difference. And it's become successful for Sean.
What Chad did got them to the point where they have the roster that they have now. You can't say, and you're not saying this, but because I know how you feel about it. You can't sit there and try to dismiss the job Chad Bowden did and then say Notre Dame's got a super talented roster when Chad Bowden, right with Marcus Freeman, was a primary driver of the success of that recruiting effort. But that was needed at the time because Notre Dame wasn't a team that was just going to immediately be mentioned with the Oregons and the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Ohio States, 4 top players. They felt they needed something that kind of, like, let's make us look different, because they were known as like a bit of a stodgy, stale kind of program, not a lot of juice in the program. And so Chad does these things and it's fun, it's hip, and it's all that stuff. And that's how Notre Dame ascends. Now they're on the same level with the big boys. And now they're trying to show, okay, here's who we are and here's what we're going to be. And that sort of salesmanship is not necessarily as needed as much from a presentation standpoint. It's certainly still needed from a recruiting effort standpoint. And for anyone that knows Chad Bowden, that's what he would do on visits. When he's having conversations with the kid, he wasn't like cracking jokes the entire time wearing a leprechaun outfit. It was about building relationships. But now it's like, hey, look, and it's a very different operation. His staff had like 3 people in it when he first got started here. Now it's a giant staff. And so there's just a lot more resources available to kind of fit where they are now and to accomplish what they're needing to accomplish now. And so I think it's very important for Notre Dame to say, okay, now to get to this next level, we're going to take a different approach. It's not a better one, not a worse one. It's just going to be a different approach to say, hey, look, this is who we are. And look, these kids still have fun on visits. It's just not so much of the gamesmanship, the CIA type of thing where, remember, they were doing, or Secret Service, remember that? They dressed up as Secret Service agents and they were patting kids down. And then Chad shows up with a boombox at the airport. Like, they're not doing that stuff, but these kids are still being entertained and still having fun. It's just a different approach now, but it's approach that is also trying to accomplish something different. You're trying to build up to something. Now you're kind of there, but you want to take it to another level. And to your point, Shaun, it is a more professional type of way. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I just mean there's a lot more structure now. It's just a different approach. And I think that's also that works. And that's what's needed for them to kind of get over the top, because now you got to let your play on the field is what's going to do the talking for you. Where before then it was this cool thing here. And Chad Bowden did a great job of selling Marcus Freeman. And he had to sell Marcus Freeman because a lot of these kids didn't know who Marcus Freeman was when he was hired as the head football coach in Notre Dame. Like, yeah, he wasn't in a D court. Like, they didn't know he wasn't known 3 years ago like he is now. Like, now he's one of the hot coaches in college football. And so what you needed to sell, you need to lift up Marcus Freeman, appeal Marcus Freeman to these kids to even get them on campus and meet him. And then when they'd meet him, he'd be himself and they'd go down that road. Now it's like, yeah, of course Marcus Freeman's calling. Of course I'm taking that call. And it's a different need, and kudos to the staff for recognizing the where they are now compared to where they are then. And as I said, I'm a big fan of the job that Chad Bowden did. I'm never someone that's going to disrespect the job that he did, but I also think that gets you to a place, and now the job is to say, okay, but now what's needed to get you to that next level? And that's what I think Mike Martin and then Jordan Blake and Carter Allman and Myron Tagovailoa and people like that are tasked with. And they're just going to take a different approach. I think the other thing, too, is just some people have different approaches to things. Not everybody recruits the same way that recruits at an elite level. Ohio State doesn't recruit the same way Georgia does. Who doesn't recruit the same way Alabama does? Who doesn't recruit the same way that Oregon does? It's about how can we get our message across and make sure it has the biggest impact, and that's where I think Notre Dame is right now. Of course, Shaun, we talk about receivers and DBs, but at the end of the day, the one area where Notre Dame is going to have to continue to build from a recruiting standpoint is the D-line. And Al Washington did an absolute monster job putting the 2026 defensive line class together. 3 of the 4 commits will be on campus this weekend: Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade, who Notre Dame went and saw last weekend when they were on the road recruiting last weekend during the bye. Tiki Hola, who I think Nick Sebastian went down and saw last week, he had a monster game this past weekend, are all going to be on campus. But there's also some very talented players coming on campus, Shaun, for visitors. So it won't just be the committed players on campus this weekend. And Notre Dame is bringing in some dudes on the edge, and they're bringing in some dudes on the inside as well. And that group is led by, as we'll go from the outside and then we'll talk inside, the big name coming on campus this weekend is David Jacobs, goes by DJ Jacobs with some. He's ranked as the number 3 overall player in the country by 247, not a 5-star, however. Rivals, he's ranked number 23. Rivals on 3, he's ranked number 23, and ESPN ranks him number 21 overall. It's a 5-star player. Shaun, you talk about wanting to get more elite, athletic, twitchy, dominant edge players. That's David Jacobs. Like, he is that kind of player. He'll be on campus this weekend, as well as his younger brother will be on campus this weekend as well. Shaun, we'll be visiting with he'll be on campus with his brother. He's also a very talented player in the 2028 class as well. But getting DJ Jacobs on campus this weekend is huge. They also have J.C. Brewer coming on campus this weekend. He's a talented 2027 player from Indianapolis. He goes to Franklin Central, ranked number 103 overall by Rivals on 3. You're going to have Jackson Vaughn on campus this weekend and Dawson Jackson on campus this weekend. Jackson Vaughn is a kid that I had a chance to see this summer. He was at Irish Invasion. Very talented young player, Shaun. Dawson Jacobs is the name of is DJ Jacobs' younger brother, who is the number 84 overall ranked player by 247 in the 2020 or 2028 class. So again, talented player in his own right. Different frame, different body type. DJ is tall and explosive. Dawson is a little shorter, powerful, also athletic player as well. But Jackson Vaughn's a player we saw this summer, Shaun, at Irish Invasion. Very talented football player. Javante Eldridge is a 2028 kid to keep an eye on. Very highly ranked 2028 kid. Very talented player. And then on the inside, you've got Braden Parks, who is criminally underrated right now by the recruiting services. That's a top 100 recruit that they have as a 3-star. That's a must-get player for Notre Dame in the 2028 class. You got Devin Robertson on campus this weekend. Notre Dame fans want more beef. Well, there you go. Devin Robertson's about 6'1.5", 6'2", 320 pounds. Braden Parks is 6'3", listed at 295. Shaun, he's going to be 315 plus probably when it's all said and done. He's a monster. You've seen him live. You've gone and seen him play this year. He was dominant this season. He's going to be on campus. Richie Flanagan's going to be on campus, who is the younger brother of James Flanagan. He's a talented player as well. He's ranked as the number 222 overall player in the country by Rivals on 3 as a defensive tackle. His dad obviously played defensive line in Notre Dame. And then you've also got a very intriguing player from Indiana, a young man by the name of Isaac Miller, who's 6'6", 245. He's Wisconsin. He's from same high school as Owen Strebig. He's a teammate of our Owen Strebig. 6'6", 245, more of an edge player now. But when you look at his frame, Shaun, as a 2028 kid, I think he's going to grow into be a 6'6", 295, 300-pound D tackle. That's where I think he's going to end up. Very intriguing player to keep an eye on. That's a really good group of players. Elite edge talent, some really good big boys on the inside. Al Washington has done a great job in the 27-28 class. There is on top of D linemen in those two classes as anybody. I mean, I literally sent a text message to somebody at Notre Dame on Irish Invasion, like, hey, can you guys slow down on some of these D-line offers on the Pot of Gold Day? Because we're having trouble keeping up and getting hold of all of them. But, a lot of talented players were on campus this summer. Chris Whitehead was on campus this summer. Marcus Fakatu is a 28 stud in the 28 class. He was on campus this summer. They've done a great job of getting interest from top D linemen in 28-7, because as good as 26 was, the key is going to be stacking comparable classes after that. And if the talent he's getting on campus for this visit is any indication, it's going to be impressive. I know Santana Hari was supposed to come, Shaun. I think you let me know that he's actually going to come for the USC game. And so he's done a great job of putting a big-time group of visitors together this weekend. Now it's going to be impress them and close on them. But, man, it's an impressive group. David Jacobs is as good of a defensive end as Notre Dame has recruited since probably Aaron Lynch at the same age. Like, he's really impressive. Really impressive.
Just some tidbit, right? I've watched Braden Parks practice this all season. I watched Brother Rice practice during the summer. I went and watched their first game against Valparaiso, Indiana. And they have a lot of talent from 29, 28. They had freshmen rotating in on the defensive line. King Liggins, 26 class, was someone that Notre Dame looked at before he eventually committed to Illinois. This is the talent he's playing with. So he doesn't play a lot of snaps, and he hasn't played much into the third quarter at all this season. So for him to have the stats that he has in the limited plays shows you how dominant he is when he does get on the field. Put up an article about him. I'm sure we're going to have some more information about his visit once he comes out. But I think it's huge to have him and Devin Robinson together, right? Because they formed a relationship at the Invasion. They were both at the Invasion. And so Devin Robinson talked about, how they've been in touch, how they kept in touch. So having them both together back here on the game day speaks volumes. I'll definitely say that Devin Robinson, if you looked at both of their recruitments, Devin Robinson was probably a little bit hotter when it came to Notre Dame early on in the process. Immediately after the offer, he was flat out honest talking about how high he was on Notre Dame and how he viewed Notre Dame. This is a kid from Mississippi saying this. So that's huge. And his father being very much in contact with the staff shows the interest that they have. And Notre Dame normally is going to be very high on the parental list of most of these top kids. Braden Parks has familial connections to Notre Dame. He has connections to former Notre Dame greats in the form of Chris Zorge, relationship there. So there's an expectation that Notre Dame should be able to lock this down. But I was talking to some of the staff on the sideline from Brother Rice, and they intimated to me that it was pretty much has been told to them by Notre Dame that they're going to do everything that they need to do to make sure that they get Braden Parks in the class.
In their mind, Shaun, he's a must get. I can attest to that talking to my sources at Notre Dame. That's not spin that they're just giving to the Braden Parks and his side. That's every time I bring up D lineman to somebody Notre Dame, it's like, yeah, we got to get Braden Parks. Got to get Braden Parks.
So that just goes to show you, like, if you can get both of those, you talk about getting those three receivers we talked about that are coming in, if they can be part of a three-man class, if you can get Devin Robinson and Braden Parks on the interior in the 27 class, you're doing something that started with the 26 class with Tiki Hola and Elijah Golden. And now you're stacking a very important position for Notre Dame's defensive program to move forward and become one of the top programs. That defensive tackle position has to become a little bit more dominant. And I think that's just an honest analysis about what's needed moving forward. And if Al Washington can do that, then you have to start really, once again, you tip your cap saying, okay, the change that was necessary has taken place. And going to the defensive ends, like you said, Jackson Bond, first of all, he comes from Bergen Catholic. So the level of competition he's going up against, the coaching that he's getting. And like you said, he jumped out to both of us at the Invasion. So I think he's a big-time guy to get in on campus. And talking to him after the Invasion, he talked about some of these kids, man, I am shocked at how grateful they are to have opportunity. Like he was really grateful for the opportunity just to be able to perform at the camp, and he was pleased with the way he performed, and he just wasn't settled on his performance and talked about getting better and talked about wanting to be a part of his team, having team success. And so he has excitement coming in as well. What else you want us to say? Whether it's wide receiver, defensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end,
it's impressive, man.
It's huge. It's impressive.
Yeah. Now, I'll just real briefly too. Also, there's some good players coming on. Cors Loken and Jack Brown at tight end in the 27 class are really good players. Noah Glover's a talented 2027 linebacker. Tavares Harrington we talked about. There's a safety that's been added to the board that I don't know a lot about other than he's a really highly ranked player with really impressive film, and that's Honor Fa'alave. It's my best shot at trying to pronounce his name. But very talented player. He's another West Coast kid that they're getting to come visit. He's from Cathedral Catholic in San Diego. And isn't that that's not where Tyler Buckner went, was it? There's somebody else recently that came from Cathedral Catholic. I don't think it was Tyler Buckner.
No.
But you know I'm talking. There was somebody that they recruited recently from Cathedral Catholic. Tyler went to he transferred I thought he might have gone there like before he transferred to Helix in La Jolla. Never actually played there. But anyway, he's another DB that's going to be added this weekend. I don't know a lot about where Notre Dame stands, but the fact is he went to the Bishops. That's right, Andrew. Thank you. But he is a guy that was recently added. Don't know a lot about him. He's highly ranked. The fact that he's coming on his own dime, I think, says that there's at least some level of interest. But we'll try to do more digging into him. But it's also a really good offensive line class. Cameron Wagner's coming. He's a talented player in the 27 class. Mark Matthews is coming. And if you guys don't know a lot about Mark Matthews, get to know Mark Matthews. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to get him. I'm not saying they're get to know him because they're going to get him. I don't know the answer to that. But he's visiting. And he seems to have, even going back to the summer, Brian Smith talked to him at a camp this summer, Shaun, and he talked about he wants to know more about Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame was a school that I wouldn't say that they were high on his list, but they were at least worthy of a school that he wants to get to know better. He'll be on campus this weekend. He's a legit top 10, 15 caliber overall player. He's another Aquinas player. He's a teammate of Julius Jones Jr., 6'5", 300 pounds, athlete. I mean, just elite talent and upside. You're going to have to impress him this weekend. That's going to be a big one. Terrence Smith is a new addition to the list, Shaun, that we were able to find out is going to try to come this weekend. He's a very talented offensive lineman from Pennsylvania. He's 6'6", 250, ranked as the number 89 overall player by Rivals on 3. So there are some also Luke Halter's a talented player coming in this weekend. There's a couple other offensive linemen coming in. That's an impressive list too. It's not as big as some of the other lists, but like Mark Matthews might be one of the best players that's visiting this weekend. If we're just talking about forget importance of position, just if we're ranking the top players, he's in the conversation with DJ Jacobs, Monson Sales, Julius Jones Jr., Quentin Burrell, Josh Dobson, Xavier Hassan. He's in that list of who are the best football players going to be on campus this weekend. Mark Matthews is absolutely in that conversation. Now, I don't know what kind of shot Notre Dame has with him, but the fact that he's coming up is important because he has expressed in the past interest in learning more about Notre Dame. Joe Rudolph's talking to him more. They're building that connection. This could be a big weekend for offensive line class. And as I mentioned, also, Terrence Smith is a guy who's a top 100 recruit as well that's going to be visiting from Pennsylvania. And then, of course, Cameron Wagner's making a return trip to Notre Dame after he had a very strong performance at Irish Invasion. Or I should say Irish Invasion. He was at the lineman camp that they had.
Cameron Wagner, 2 of his top 5 teams we faced off against each other on Saturday night. So to say this is something that's going to have a huge impact on how he evaluates his recruitment, it's pretty much, it would be spot on. This is huge. And he talked about Notre Dame, loves the campus, loves the coaches. I flat out asked him, is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to the most? And he was like, not really. Like he pretty much is in a place where I know what Notre Dame is and who they are, and I know what they give to me. Now I'm just really looking at, having a game day experience, and he's more focused on, he's like, I just beat all game. Like he was like, I'm excited to just meet the fans, talk to the fans, get to know them. And I'm like, man, you're sounding like you're ready to, pop the bubble on this thing, but he's super excited. The Mark Matthews thing, that would be beyond incredible really to stack him and Will Black in back-to-back classes, that'd be pretty huge, right?
Yeah.
Or to get them in classes, which would kind of
Yeah.
Notre Dame has done a good job of getting Joe Alts, getting the Ronnie Stanleys, guys that were 3 stars and then late risers, and all of a sudden they become all Americans and they go into the NFL to become all pro, right? But just flat out getting that 5-star top 5 tackle in his class at that position, or lineman at his position, of recent hasn't been the case. And so you get Will Black, who's one of those guys, and then to follow it up and get a guy like Matthews would be an incredible feat. If they can, I would love to see the development of getting him back on campus, getting him to make an official, like all of that matters. And how many times did we say, or have we said, Bryan, in recruiting, it matters even if you don't get the kid.
Yeah.
Because it draws attention from other top kids in other classes. Like to have him visit for a game day, the antennas go up for other great offensive linemen. And then maybe you can get them on campus and finish the deal. It matters, So second place probably matters more in recruiting than in any of. No one wants to finish second, but finishing second for a top kid in recruiting can pay some really big dividends down the line.
Yeah, Shaun, it's going to be a big weekend recruiting trail. There's no doubt about it. They've got to play well on the field, and our next topic is going to talk about that. We're going to break down the players on each side of the ball that we think are most important to success this weekend. We'll get to that here right after this. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you haven't done so for us, we would greatly appreciate if you could go to our podcast platform. You can do that for Irish Breakdown, do that for Lucky Lefty, do that for CFP Nation, but especially Irish Breakdown. Since we're on the Irish Breakdown show right now, leave us a 5-star review. Tell people why you like listening to Irish Breakdown and why you like listening to the show. It helps us, it helps us to kind of spread the news, so to speak. It helps the algorithm, helps people pick it. Like, hey, if you're looking for Notre Dame football, this is a show that you need to watch. So greatly helps us with there. And then, of course, as always, the best way to support Irish Breakdown is to sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Shaun, part 2 of today's show, we're going to get into as our RTCF show. It's recruiting, team, college football. So we're going to go to our team topic. And our team topic today, we've spent all week breaking the show down. You guys have spent all week breaking this game down. You guys have spent all week breaking the game down. And now it's time to we're a day away. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. We're going to break down the 5 players on each side of the ball here on Irish Breakdown, presented by FanDuel. That's going to say, hey, these are the guys that we think are going to have the biggest say on how Notre Dame performs this weekend and whether or not Notre Dame wins a game this weekend. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we'll go 5 on offense, 5 on defense, and we're going to start on offense, Shaun. And you start, you'll give your top one, or you'll give one, I'll give one, and we'll go back that way. We compared notes beforehand, a lot of the same guys that we have on this list. But let's kick things off, Shaun. When you look at it, who is the number one offensive player that you look at and say, that guy's performance is going to have a big role in Notre Dame getting a much-needed win this weekend?
It's definitely going to be a combination of Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp. I'll start with the tackles. Why is that? Even as Notre Dame comes off a game where you saw 16 combined carries from Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, you would think Notre Dame is going to come into this game against Texas A&M and just pound the ball and try to assert their physicality upon the Aggies. It's a pretty good chance that they're going to do that. I don't know if they're going to come right out the gate and do that. Maybe they get to it or try to build to it. That's going to be interesting to watch. But the tackles in pass pro, especially against a Mike Elko defense that wants to put you in 3rd, 5, and long. That's what they want to get you to. And Mike Elko can come with his design defenses, zone blitzes, things of that nature, and really mess with you. You saw last year against Riley Leonard, they came and dropped that safety down to the box very late in the play clock. So I think the going to be very important for Notre Dame to secure and give opportunity for Notre Dame to take shots down the field, right? I think they're going to go allow to. Marcus Freeman talked about it. It kind of gave the connotation that maybe they're going to allow CJ Carr to throw the ball down the field a little bit more. The kind of game plan to kind of ease him into the first game. That's why he threw a lot of screens. And he pretty much said, like, if it was up to him, if we allowed it to be up to him, he would pretty much take shots all the time. Yes, that's the type of mindset that he has. So I'm excited to see that. But the tackles for me are going to be vitally important in this game because if you look at Texas A&M over the last 2 years, they had names on the defensive line last year. They have some names and a stud edge rusher. They got to get a kid that's going to be really good coming off the edge, that you want to keep him out of those third and long situations. But they struggle to stop big runs. They struggled. They gave up big runs. Go back to the big runs they gave up against Notre Dame last year. And then you look, even with the talent they had that went to the NFL, they struggled as a defensive unit, defensive line, giving up big runs in the run game. So you look and expect that to continue. Look at that first two games against UTSA, Utah State. They gave up big runs in those games. So that has been a trend for them that they're going to try and stop against Notre Dame. In order to do that, do they leave themselves even more vulnerable on the back end that could play into Notre Dame taking more shots down the field? If that's the case, those tackles have to hold up. They have to hold up and give the offense time and the receivers time to get downfield and make plays so that CJ Carr can make those connections.
So your number one starts on the edges of the offensive line, right? That's mine. I mean, I got it right here. I got Knapp, Wagner, number one. I'm right there with you. So to your point, I think your last sentence, Shaun, wraps it all up for me. All the other kids we're going to talk about, CJ Carr, Jeremiah Love, all these different guys flat out can't thrive the way they're capable of if those two guys don't play a lot better than they did last week. Just won't happen. Can't happen. So they're 100% at the top of my list. So why don't we go to your number two?
My number two is a young man that gave me a vibe when he spoke to the media that he feels like he's going to be more part of the game plan. And I can understand when Marcus Freeman saying early on we wanted to give CJ some shorter passes to make it a little bit easier for him in his first game. That does not seem like it includes Jaden Greathouse, who is my number two. I feel like Jaden Greathouse, when Jaden Greathouse is part of the offensive package and plan, Notre Dame usually does well. I mean, go figure. Like when he goes in the passing game, Notre Dame usually has some big plays in the passing game. You look at the playoffs, other than Jordan Faison against Indiana, most of the big plays, Penn State, Ohio State, it's Jaden Greathouse. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to it. He sounded like someone that feels like he's going to be part of the game plan this week when he spoke to the media. So for me, my antennas went up and I'm like, okay, if I would place a prop bet on FanDuel, I would look right at Jaden Greathouse and what his numbers are as far as passing yards this week. Because I feel like he's going to get that opportunity. Oh yeah.
Like if you look at his numbers for FanDuel, Shaun, it's 28.5, which again, I don't have a problem with. He caught 0 passes in the opener. He had several games last year where he caught 0-1 passes. That's the whole thing we talked about with Jaden this offseason was, could he become a more consistent player? Like to me, that's partly coaching and partly the quarterback and partly Jaden too. I mean, that's the thing. I was one of the few things I was really disappointed about in the opener because I didn't have the same sort of horribly negative reaction to Mike Denbrock's play calling in game one as a lot of other people did. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I understood there were some execution problems and there were some other things. that were there. One of the things I did not like is it was very clear that getting Jaden Greathouse more involved in the offense wasn't a priority for Mike Denbrock in the opener. That's got to change in this game. Flat out has got to change in this game. And if they don't do that, then it's going to be a problem. So he's on my list, Shaun. I had him number 4. I think Jaden Greathouse can certainly play a role in having an impact in this game. The more he's involved, I just think the tougher it is to defend this offense. That's just a reality. Who's your number 3, Shaun?
My number 3 was somebody that almost didn't make my list. And I shared this with you because I really wanted to sneak the tight end onto the list. But CJ Carr, it goes without saying. Like, CJ Carr has to continue to play at the level that he showed he could play at, specifically in the second half of that game against Miami. If that CJ Carr continues to play that way, and that, mind you, he played that way without good play at the tackles. So you can imagine how much better he can play if his tackles actually play a good game. CJ Carr, for me, if he was amped up early in that game against Miami, first home game under the lights at Notre Dame, you can imagine he's still going to be amped up for this one as well. But I think the moxie he has and just the talent and the ability that you saw in the past game, I think Notre Dame does a better job of helping him and assisting him with the run game and certain play calls. And I think the offense takes a step forward. So him being the quarterback is always having the ball in his hands each and every snap. I had to put him at number 3 for me.
I had CJ number 1, or actually had CJ number 2 on my list, Shaun. And a reason why I'm like, okay, we're now to our number 3. I've said who my number 4 is, and we've yet to talk about Jeremiah Love. There's a reason for that, and we'll get to that at the end. But CJ Carr is important for me because Notre Dame's going to want to get Jeremiah Love more involved in the game. Hopefully, they also get Jadarian Price involved in the game because those two guys are what drove the success against them last year. Like that you don't think A&M knows that? You don't think they know that? But here's the deal. They got to have an ability to say, okay, they know that they're going to stop the run. We've got to be able to take some of that pressure off them. And to me, that's going to be CJ Carr. I don't care how much you want to involve Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the game. Doesn't really matter to me. If you don't have the ability to take the pressure off of them, you're going to have trouble. They took the pressure off of them last year with Riley Leonard's running ability. They would run quarterback counter. They ran some reads. He scrambled, and he had a couple throws. But it was really about having that running threat at quarterback. We don't have that this year. So you've got to be able to take the pressure off of them throwing the football down the field. And when I mean down the field, I don't mean 30-yard shots. I just mean past the line of scrimmage and getting the ball outside of the box. That's what I'm referring to. And so you're going to need CJ to perform well. I don't think he's got to look like a Heisman Trophy winner in this game. I just think he needs to make good reads, get the ball where it's supposed to go, including sometimes that means handing the ball off to Jeremiah Love when you're supposed to hand the ball off to Jeremiah Love, pulling when you're supposed to pull, making good decisions, being accurate to football, knowing what to do when you get pressured. You know, something he didn't do a great job of against Miami. Part of that's because the pressure got to him so quickly. Those are things that he's going to have to perform better at, Shaun. But I think overall he did very well in the opener. Very well. But he's going to have to perform as well. And so he's a big part of this. That's my 4. That's my number 2 guy. I mentioned my number 4 was Jaden Greathouse. Shaun, let's go to your 5th guy, and then I'll mention my 5th guy who actually no, you're at 4.
We're my 4th guy. My 4th guy. 4. Yeah, combination of the running backs, Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love. We talk about the emphasis and the weakness of this front 7 or this front 6 for Texas A&M has been the inability to stop the big run plays. And so Jadarian and Jeremiah, you look at the film, something you shared with me and watching the film and me looking at the game again, there were opportunities there to run where Notre Dame was just off a little bit from breaking a big one against Miami on several chances and several opportunities within the game. So I think the opportunities for big plays are going to be there in the run game. But more than that, I think it has a domino effect, right? For me, For when you have a guy and that guy goes out there early and establishes himself, it just permeates and gives confidence to everybody else. You know what I'm saying? A big moment or a big game when Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Larry Bird, they come out in that first quarter and they put up 10, 12 points, it's like, okay, our guys going, let's go. And I think Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, if they can come out early and just really kind of punch Texas A&M in the mouth, that would go a long way to even inspiring the defense to say, okay, let's get the rock right back to, like, let's get the rock back, get off on third down, get the ball right back to this offense and go put some more points on the board. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that. Even in the midst of Texas A&M probably expecting that, I'm looking forward to this offensive line establishing themselves. And I think Jadarian Price talked about that this week when he spoke to the media. It's about them as the running backs, trusting the offensive line to do their job, and then trusting their work and having patience, and then trusting that the wide receivers are outside blocking as well, which is something that goes a long way to those long runs happening. Your wide receivers have to block along with the tight ends.
I'm going to go. This is my number 3, but my 4th guy we're going to talk about because I had Jaden Greathouse number 4, which I talked about before. My number 3 was my Malachi Fields. And I just think in this specific matchup, Malachi is going to be an important player. Number 1, run game, blocking in the run game. The way that A&M plays the boundary, I think there's going to be some opportunities to get him the ball in some quick game, maybe some screens, things along those lines. But at the end of the day, he's going to have to make plays down the field, Shaun. He's going to have to win some back shoulders like we saw in the opener, like we saw Bo Collins do against Texas A&M last year. He's going to have to hit some of those backside dig routes. It wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame can do some things where maybe like we saw in the opener where they get him in the slot and run some slot fades and do some different things like that. I think this is a game where he has to step up and perform well. You could point to Jordan Faison, Micah Gilbert, Jaden Greathouse we talked about. But I think in this instance, Malachi Fields performing at a high level is going to be very important for Notre Dame. I think if he performs well, it takes a lot of pressure off CJ Carr. It softens the defense. It allows them they are going to have to back off a little bit from the run game. And then I just think that opens up other things. If you start winning in the boundary or even in moving him around to get him some other matchups, which again, they did in the opener, I think that's going to because and what I mean, like they moved him inside to number 2 into the boundary with the tight end number 1 and then ran him on a slot fade. They didn't put him to the slot to the field to run it. I wouldn't mind that though. Dependence and see what they do. And then maybe you could have some things backside with Jaden Greathouse and the tight end backside and kind of see how they handle it. But I think if Malachi Fields has a good game, an impactful game, that does a lot for the rest of the offense. And that's why Malachi Fields was my third behind number 1, my tackles. My number 1 was the tackles. Number 2 is CJ Carr. That's why I have Malachi Fields number 3, because as I'm going through a lot of this, I keep pointing to things that are going to take pressure off of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. And that's where a lot of my 5 are. Doesn't mean that these guys are more important than Jeremiah Love. It means that everybody in the stadium, including the coaches on the other team and the person on the other team, knows that number 4 is your dude. So what are you going to do to take some of the pressure off number 4 that then allows him to then go thrive? O-line playing better, CJ making better decisions, Malachi stepping up and making plays, et cetera, now makes it much harder to defend number 4. And then that allows you to get some chance to get him into running him into some good favorable boxes, get him to second level. All those things are important in this game that make it easier for Jeremiah and Jadarian. So that's why I think Malachi is such an important figure in this offense in this game. And I was like I said, there's a couple things I was disappointed in the opener, play calling wise, and I didn't feel like outside of the early screen that there was a whole lot designed to Malachi either. It's like they were certainly force feeding the ball to Jordan Faison and the tight end, which I'm not against. But I just want to see that same kind of energy be spent on getting the ball to Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse in this game.
You know what? I think about Malachi Fields is number 5 for me. Yeah, he was on my list, and I have him fifth on the list. But you just opened up something in my mind that made me think about Ohio State, right? That has a diverse set of weapons at the wide receiver position, but they got a dog. Sometimes you have to establish this is going to be the main target guy in this room. And I think we all want Malachi Fields to become that. We hope he can become that. When he came through the transfer portal, that was something that we envisioned based upon his last 2 seasons of production at Virginia. And then you have guys that have purposes, right? For a long time, or we can see it, Jeremiah Smith is the guy. He's going to get the most targets. We're going to find different ways to get him the ball for different formations. He might be in the boundary. We might put him in the slot. We're just going to try and get him the ball. But then you have Carnell Tate. He's the big play guy. Like, they use him to get over the top, even last year, and they're going to take shots with him within the game, right? He's going to run the post routes. He's going to run the go routes and some sluggos and things of that nature. And then you're going to have guys like Brandon Ennis that are like intermediate guys, screen. And so I think we know that Jordan Faison is kind of that guy for them in the screen game. But I agree with you. I want to see Malachi Fields get 8 targets in the game. Get him 8 targets with 6 receptions. And then, let Jaden Greathouse be that guy in the slot that you can take advantage of the safeties, especially if they're going to be creeping down into the box, getting some play action, or just run the slot fade with him, or let him do his thing and get the ball to him in creative ways. I just really want to start to see this offense kind of set the roles for the wide receiver room as this season goes on, right? Where everybody's going to be part of the game, but you know your role. This is your role week to week. And if you want to shift depending upon the opponent, then that's fine. But I do envision Malachi Fields being a huge part of this game. A huge part of this game. I think watching the film, he probably should have had more targets last week. And the film kind of bears that out. But you came away from the game seeing that he's somebody that teams are like, all right, we might come up close and playing bump and run man to man in this situation, but we don't want to give him that look over and over again. Like, we're going to be off of him. I think on the interception, I shared with you on the interception, if CJ Carr is in his in his second year as a starter, and that same look, instead of going away from the run because he sees 7 in the box, he looked out to his left and he just has a relationship with Malachi Fields, who has a guy 10 yards off of him. I'm just about to throw it out to you because that's something that Ohio State is just built into their offense. Like, you can always just give it to him. If all this fails and you don't see anything else, just throw it out to Jeremiah Smith and just let him make a play. And so those are some things, some automatics that I would love to see, because I think Malachi Fields is going to have a lot of situations where people are playing him 8 to 10 yards off the ball.
That's your 5. That's your 5th guy, right? Mine was right guard. I think it's an important week for right guard. And I do expect that we're going to see Gerby Lambert again. Who knows what the rotation is going to look like. I don't have a clue if it's just going to be Gerby or we're going to see a rotation again. I don't know. What I do know, though, is the right guard position is going to be filled by a very talented player, but a very young and inexperienced player who made mistakes in the opener. And that's not Gerby Lambert. That's Gerby Lambert and Sullivan Absher. Both had those issues in the opener. But they also both had some impressive blocks. And I would argue watching Gerby was kind of like watching Sam Pendleton last year, although he's bigger and more talented in that, Sam struggled in the opener against A&M, but Sam also had probably the most 3 impressive blocks of the game, on the offensive line against A&M as well. And Gerby had some of those moments. Like, there's times like, dude, this guy's going to be a first-round draft pick somewhere. Like this guy's got feet and he's great size, he's strong, and all. But then it's just like, but he's young, he's making technical mistakes, things that you expect a guy to make in his first start. And Sully had the same problem. And so I expect improvement from Gerby here. Now that he's got, you had the first game, you've got 2 weeks to prepare. He's still going to make his young guy mistakes, but I do think he's going to play better. But here's the deal. A&M knows that he's a young player that's prone to mistakes. I think they're going to slant at him, twist at him. I think they're going to do second-level stunts at him, have a D-tackle go across his face, bring a linebacker down inside, make him have to make decisions, turn his feet one way or the other, and go at him to try to create some run-through opportunities. And so he's going to have to be prepared for that, and he's going to have to play more sound than he did in the opener. But if he can be more sound while maintaining the dominant moments like he had in the opener, then very quickly here over the next month, Gerby Lambert's going to be like, dude, this might be your best run blocker. I mean, he's got that kind of potential to quickly become your best run blocker. And he's going to need to play better in this game. And no question about it. He showed flashes in the opener, Shaun. I loved what I saw from him when he was right in the opener. Yeah. And that's why I'm not, bench him. No, keep playing him. Because the more he plays, the more he's going to work out some of those mistakes. And when you get a guy that's like maybe executing at a 90% clip, or let's say an 80% clip, right? Then he at an 85% clip of correctness with the dominance he shows, he's even better. And you get him up to 90%, he's even better. And now he becomes a really impact offensive lineman. That's only going to change with more experience, more work, more coaching. You do that, I think Gerby's going to be just fine. But A&M's going to come at him is the point. They're going to do things to try to create mistakes by him. And then when Sully's in the game, they're going to try to do the same thing with him. So that position is going to have to be important because, you have 4 guys doing your job, and then the right guard doesn't do his, and all of a sudden a potential 30-yard game by Jeremiah Love turns into a -2. Or, you've got Malachi Fields smokes a guy in a post route, but C.J. Carr's throwing it away or scrambling because the right guard didn't do his job. I think that position can be very important. With Billy and Ashton, it's like, dude, just keep doing what you guys always do when you play. Like, just play good, solid football at a bare minimum, and sometimes you play great football. They're going to need, obviously, the tackles, but I just felt like starting it and ending it with an offensive line position was super important in this game because if that unit plays well as a whole, Shaun, then the Notre Dame offense is going to move the ball and score. It really is that simple. If the offensive line plays well, Jeremiah Love's going to get his. If the offensive line plays well and C.J. Carr has time to throw, he's going to perform. If the offensive line plays well and C.J. Carr has time to throw, that means Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, Eli Rayd, and those guys are going to make plays. So it really starts with them. So that's why my number 1 and my number 5 were that position. But I could be wrong. I just have a feeling like there's going to be a moment early in the season where the light kind of just goes on for Gerby, where you're going to still see some rookie mistakes from him, but you're just going to overall see a guy that's like, this guy's really good. And I hope that we start to see more of that in this game.
I think the goals, they're tied together. And let's focus on that right guard position. That's number 5 for you. One of the things you were upset about is the fact that not that you played 2 young guys last year, but you put them together, which meant they had no standard next to them. Like, and Malik always talks about Sam and Quentin would just have to give a look. They do. If you messed up something, they just gave you a look. Like, what are you doing? Like, Harry didn't have to say a word. They held you accountable. It's hard to hold youngsters accountable and give them that standard. Of course, what was to the right guards left, Billy and Ashton was pretty good. It's good for the most part, right? But you can't have the other side while they're trying to figure things out. You can't have the other side be that bad. And so that ties in that right tackle situation with that right guard. Like, Emil Wagner, you got to be a captain. You have to be steady. You have to be solid every week. You have to be able to hold the right guard accountable to say, hey, we have to be steady. You can't have the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys. Just do your job. Just do your job. And like you said, if they do their job, they're going to have those incredible moments where you say, man, that's really good. We has a chance to be the best run blocking lineman that we have. So that's what it's really all about. Like, they're intertwined. The performance at tackle and guard are intertwined, right? And then you question at the left tackle, You got these two guys to your right playing good. You don't want to be the guy from center going all the way to the left that's not holding up his end of the bargain. So I like that. You're making me rethink, my list, because I never looked at that right guard situation the way you laid it out. I did. That's good, bro. That's good. That's good.
I try. Well, Shaun, that's going to do it for the offensive side. Let's move over to defense. And, as we continue to, kind of break this whole thing down and we look at the Notre Dame defense and we think of, as we talk more about this show of Irish Breakdown brought to you by FanDuel, I think the defense is a very interesting side of the ball, because I was more disappointed by how this side of the ball played than I was the offense. I didn't think the offense was going to come out looking like gangbusters. I was not shocked that CJ Carr wasn't 100% with his decision-making. I wasn't surprised that the offensive line didn't look like a Joe Moore Award winner in the opener. I was surprised at how bad they looked, but you have, Eli Raridan step into a new role and your receiving core, you're learning. I thought an offense is usually slow starting. I mean, usually when you're playing good teams, your offenses don't look like world beaters early in the season. We've seen that with a lot of teams that have played quality opponents early in the season, where their offense didn't look great. I mean, Texas and Ohio State, neither of their offenses look good. Now, do they both have good defenses? Of course, but they're not that good where they're going to play a 14-7 game. It's because it's early in the season. If those two teams played in 2 months, I still think Ohio State wins. I still think it's a close game. I think it's probably 27-20, 24-17. Offenses usually tend to be behind earlier in the season. I just expected that. I was very disappointed by how kind of average the defense looked in the game. So this side of the ball is going to have to perform better, Shaun, and we're going to see if they can. And I saw the over-under. Let me find this thing from Trev. The over-under for the game is 50.5. I think Texas A&M, as of yesterday, was set to get, I believe it was 20.5 points was kind of there. I'd be curious, when was the last time in the regular season a Notre Dame opponent was favored to score over 20 points? Or at least not favored, but the number was set at over 20 points. I think that speaks volumes to how good A&M looked on offense first two games. But then also, this isn't a vintage Notre Dame defense. So they're going to have to get better. So when we break this down, Shaun, let's start off with who's your number one player on defense that you think is key to the defense playing to the level they're capable of and then helping lead them to a victory in this game.
It's interesting you thought about your disappointment in the defense more, because I was kind of shocked immediately after the game that Marcus Freeman kind of felt that way. I mean, I understood it because he's a defensive coach. So I understood his expectation and the bar that he sets for that defense and how he kind of, it's almost like have two children. And you have one kid that you could be really tough on because he could take it. And then you have another kid that might be a little more sensitive, so you might have to rub their back a little more. And it seems like that's the approach he took with the offense. All right, let me rub these offensive line and let them know we still love you. We still think you're really good, but let me go in here with my defense and let them know, hey, what are we doing? That's unacceptable, right? And so as the week went on, I was like, I get it. I understand it. And, there were some things that you feel like, we got to clean that up. But it still goes back to what he said. And I think he felt coming to the season that they were going to be able to apply pressure with the front four. That's something he has constantly talked about leading into the Miami game, after the Miami game, and then during the bye week. And so Boubacar Traore is my number one. I love his first game back against Miami. What I saw in that heat, I was like, okay. He's going to be fine. If he can stay healthy, because I think he's still going to get better physically throughout the season. And I think you're going to see the best for Boubacar Traore is still ahead of him. He's number one for me. You need to make Marcel Reed feel uncomfortable. You need to make him feel uncomfortable. Make him move. That's one of the things I feel really good about this matchup. I don't think offensively or defensively they have experienced resistance this year. I think Texas A&M has gone out and played and pretty much been able to do whatever they want to do. I don't think they've really felt resistance. I don't think another team has really made them feel. Notre Dame has to make them feel them early in this game. And I think that pass rush, closing in the pocket, having a disciplined pass rush, staying in your rush lanes, and then just getting him the third down and making him have to beat you from the pocket. All of that plays into Boubacar Traore being, for me, number one on the defensive side of the ball. He has to apply pressure.
I'm with you on that, Shaun. I think that I'm with the D-line number one also. My number one guy is Jason Onye. And look, with Jared Dawson, just do what you did last week. With Gabriel Rubio, just do what you did last week. With Jason Onye, it was very up and down last week. And, we've seen him be a dominant practice player. We've seen him be a dominant player in the spring game. And we saw flashes of him being a pretty dominant player last year in games as the season wore on. He was solid against A&M and then just kept getting better before he had to leave the team. They're going to need him to be that dude this year. They just are. And this is a game where he's kind of got to be that dude. Now, am I saying he's got to go be Riley Mills? No, he's not Riley Mills. They're different players. They need Jason Onye to be a factor up the middle. I really believe, Shaun, I've said it over and over. No one's going to be surprised by this. If you want to be an elite defense, you got to be elite up the middle. And that's my number one and my number two and my number three are all right up the middle. It's not till I get to number 4 and 5 that I'm talking about guys on the edge. And I'm going to go front, middle, back in my 3. I'm just preparing you right now. And they're all going to be right up the middle. And it's Jason Onye is that guy. If Dawson and Rubio just continue to do what they did in the opener, but Onye steps up and plays better, then this interior is going to be better, in my opinion. And Jason Onye, if he then plays like a wrecker, which I think he's capable of being, then all of a sudden this looks a lot different. And now A&M's struggling a little bit. Now you're collapsing the pocket in the middle. You're forcing Marcel Reed to work for width, which allows the speed for Notre Dame to take over. You shut down the run game, or you at least slow down the run game. The interior starts playing well. That's going to be very, very good news for the Notre Dame defense. And I think it starts with Jason Onye stepping up his game, and then hoping that Rubio and Jared Dawson and those guys can continue to kind of do what they did in the opener. Obviously, you need Donovan Hinish to play better as well, but this isn't, to me, a Donovan Hinish game. You're playing a massive offensive line. This is more of a Jason Onye, Gabriel Rubio, Jared Dawson, potentially maybe an Armel Mukum, Elijah Hughes type of game. That's what's needed more in this game. And that's why it's my number one. What's your 2, Shaun?
For me, the 2 is the opposite defensive end. Like, this isn't just, man, Boubacar has to apply the pressure. And you made me include the defensive tackles, specifically Jason Onye. Who's going to be that second person to be able to collapse the pocket? Is it going to come from the opposite defensive end, or is it going to come from the interior? Is it going to be Jared Dawson? Is it going to be Jason Onye? That's going to be very key. Right, especially with a smaller quarterback or a shorter quarterback, if you can get into his face, get into his eyes. I think one of the greatest rules that I heard from the offensive line coach this week was, I tell my offensive linemen, don't let anything flash. It's your job to not let your quarterback see anything in front of his eyes. Give him a clean sight. As long as he has clean sight, you did your job in pass pro. And so we want to, blur that line of sight for Marcel Reed, right? Get into his vision, make him move, because if you get into his vision, the natural athlete that he is, his natural inclination is going to be to come off his progression and eventually try to get out of the pocket and make plays. And I don't worry about the speed of our defense. I think this defense is going to be in pursuit mode a lot more than they were against Miami. So for me, who's going to be that second guy to add a pass rush, regardless of whether or not it comes from the inside or whether it comes from the opposite defensive end?
My number 2, Shaun, is Drake Bowen. I told you I'm going to go right up the middle. They need a bigger game from Drake Bowen. This is going to be about Drake playing better, and this is going to be about the coaching staff not asking the linebackers to do what they did. All the linebackers, including Kingston Viliama-Asa, were not good playing off-ball linebacker. Go back and watch the game. Every play that Kingston made in this game was coming off the edge. When they played off-ball, they were passive. They didn't attack. They got swallowed up by blockers. They were tackling guys 3, 4, 5 yards downfield. and it wasn't good. So part of this is scheme. And then the other part of it is, Drake Bowen's got to then also go execute that scheme at a high level with some ferocity and be the leader of the defense. And so I could say Chris Ash, and that's why I'm kind of going here, because Chris Ash has got to put the linebackers in position to be more successful, but you need your captain to step up and play better this week. You need your defensive coordinator to then put your captain in a position to play better this week. That's going to be key. If he turns these linebackers loose, Shaun, then I'm very confident that they will slow down the A&M defense. If they sit back and try to play the football type of stuff we saw in week 1, then we're going to see similar results. That's just the reality of it. So this is not as much about a player needing to play better, although all of the linebackers need to play better as off-ball linebackers. This is also about the coaching putting them in position to do that. I also will say again, I want to see more against this run game and this big offensive line. If we don't see a lot of Kingston and Drake together, I'm going to be upset. You're playing against an offensive line that averages over 320 pounds and pretty good-sized running backs. You got to have your 2 best linebackers on the field, and I will contend that your 2 best linebackers are still Drake and Kingston. I want to see more of that in this game. And then if they play together, then you guys go be dudes, and you let them be dudes. That's important in this game, Shaun.
Linebacker are my number 5. I think the trio, we know we have great running backs, but that trio that's coming in to Texas A&M, Le'Veon Moss, Reuben Owens, and then Amari Daniels, who at the end of last year was really the go-to guy in the run game. They're pretty deep, they're pretty effective, and they've been pretty good in the first 2 games. So linebackers have to be for several reasons. I think the linebackers also connect to another group on my list, which is the safeties, which I'm sure you're going to get to straight up the middle. Tackling is a premium this week. They have a group of explosive wide receivers that find all types of different ways to get them the football. But tackling, just totally as a defense, but specifically the linebackers have to be keen not only on the running backs, but Marcel Reed, being an extra runner. And what can he do in situations? The middle of the field, they have a tight end that they've been using the first 2 games that, you're going to have to deal with in passing situations as well. The middle of the field is going to be vitally important. That's prime real estate in this matchup defensively for Notre Dame. And so you're going to need the linebackers and the safeties to play really well in the middle of the field and diagnose things. And that fit ball you talked about, a lot of times comes with guys not just playing, like get up the field, be aggressive, be fast. Don't play like you're just reacting to something. Like take the action to Texas A&M. Strike them first. Be the striker. And I think that's what you want to see from this defense. And you want to see that from your linebackers. You don't want to see them reacting. You want them being aggressive and running to the football and making plays. And then you want your safeties running to the football. And, like Marcus Freeman said, I know a lot of people felt like he wasn't taking a jab. He was just using a point of reference, a certain play, and just saying, when the ball's in the air, you have to go out, go point the ball. Don't wait for it. Go be aggressive and get the ball. So I think for me, linebacker to safety is definitely important.
That's my 3. And I'm going with leaders of groups this week. I'm not going with safety positions. Like your explanation is perfectly fine. The whole safety room has to play better, but your leader's got to be the one that starts that. Your leader's got to be the one that leads that. Don Schuler's the leader of this football team. He's a captain. And even if he didn't have a C on his chest, he's a captain on that defense. I mean, he showed that last year, Shaun. He was a redshirt freshman, first-year starter, never played a meaningful down of football outside of the Sun Bowl. And we could argue if that was a meaningful down, that it's the Sun Bowl. He stepped up as a leader day 1. In spring, he showed leadership abilities. Part of being a leader, with all due respect to the comments made by Marcus Freeman, part of being a leader is playing at a high level. His whole, I don't want captains to be evaluated by how they play, nonsense. You have to be a great leader to be a great captain, but you also need your leaders to play good football. And Adon is capable of being a stud at Notre Dame. He wasn't bad last week. He had that one bad play. He had an early mistake. He wasn't bad, but I know he's capable of playing better. I know he's capable of being more impactful. And I can promise all of you this. There's not a soul in this chat. There's not a soul watching this show. There's not a soul doing the show that's more pissed off about a Don Schuler not making that interception in the end zone than a Don Schuler. I promise you that. And I have a feeling that a Don's going to come out there and say, hey, I need to go make a play. As I said yesterday to Shaun, I need to make sure a Don doesn't overdo it, doesn't be too aggressive, like play under control. But you need a Don Schuler to go out there and be a Don Schuler this week. And he was impactful last year's game because a guy like him, it's not just about, playing that robber coverage and making plays coming downhill, playing properly over top, being in perfect position like he was last year to make that interception where, the guy sailed the ball. Yeah, the guy sailed the ball, and Adon was right where he was supposed to be, playing over the top to be able to intercept that pass. But he's going to also need to come down and be a factor in the run game against Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels, and they're going to need him to be a sound tackler, come down aggressively, and make a lot of plays. So I'm with you, Shaun. Adon Schuler's my number 3. Sounds like linebackers are your number 3. You kind of do your 2 and 3 together, or did you have something else at number 3?
No, that was 2 and 3 for me.
Okay, so we're same page so far. Let's go.
No, that was 4. I'm sorry, that was 3 and 4 for me. I'm sorry. Because I had Bubakar one, the opposite, other end, the second pass rusher, and then safety linebacker.
So you did 3 and 4 together. My number 4 is Bryce Young. And the reason I'm going Bryce Young specifically is because Josh Burnham did his job in the last game. He was stout against the run. He was good against the run. Now, you need him to do it again. I thought Junior, in very limited opportunities, did his job. That's all I'm asking you to do. Jordan Patel only played 9 snaps last week. Maybe they'll ramp him up a little bit. But Bryce Young was very up and down in the opener. He had a couple good snaps. He had some snaps where he got dominated off the ball. I still don't think playing him inside in an odd front is necessarily a great thing to do with him. He's still only 275, but he also has to be better in those moments. I need to see more from Bryce Young this week. He had some flashy plays, but again, folks, I warned y'all this summer, Bryce isn't going to come out looking like, Hercules day one and just do that all season. He's going to have a bit of an up and down season. It's next year that I think he has the true star breakout because he's still a raw player. He's going to have his ups and downs, and that's okay. It's just in a game like this, you need it to be an up game for him. That's the reality of it. In a game like this, you need your dudes to be dudes, and there aren't many more dudes in this game than Bubakar and Bryce. You talked about Bubakar number 1. I'm right there with you. He needs to be impactful. I left him off kind of because I felt like he was going to be. I thought last game Bubakar was pretty good. I think the player opposite him in this week's game, Bryce Young, has to be a dude. If he is, it makes it a lot easier to defend the run. You're setting the edge effectively, which, like I said, Burnham was great at last week. Bubakar was surprisingly good at last week. But this needs to be one of those up games for Bryce. And they're just going to need it. They're going to need him to kind of relax. I think sometimes Bryce is putting too much pressure on himself to go make a play.
Just go have fun, man.
Yes, just relax and go ball, buddy. You don't need to be your dad. You don't need to be this. You don't need to be the fight. Just go play ball. Relax and go do your job and do it as hard as you can. And you could tell Bryce puts a lot on himself, and they're going to have to get him to kind of take a deep breath. Josh Burnham's that way too. Really puts a lot on himself. Dude, just take a deep breath and go play ball. And if he does that, I think Bryce is going to have a big game. And he's capable of having a big game. And if Bryce has a big game and Bubakar just kind of does what he always does, now all of a sudden you're now we're cooking with oil, Shaun. Now we got something going. So that's why he's my number 4. Let's go with the last one, Shaun, number 5.
You know what? I'm going to expand my number 5. I know we talked about this before the show because number 5 for me was going to be the nickel and the combination of Carson Hobbs and Devontae Smith. But I'm going to expand that passing situation because I think it's going to include the linebackers. I think we saw several times where Miami attacked the seams on third downs, whether it was the tight end or whether it was mesh routes coming across the middle by the wide receivers or some type of double route by Malachi Tony. And, of course, the touchdown Malachi Tony had in man-to-man coverage. I think that's something that Texas A&M is going to look at, Klein is going to look offensively and say, yo, I think we can take advantage of certain things in certain situations right here. So whether it's a combination of linebackers having to cover a certain zone, over the slot or get out to that slot and zone, or whether it's the nickelbacks having to be in coverage and be a little bit tighter in coverage, I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be shored up, because I think with the explosive players and the interchangeable pieces, they have 3 interchangeable pieces that they can put in the slot at different times, and they all are explosive, can make plays. So I think that's going to be a challenge for the Notre Dame defense. And I'm interested in seeing how, whether it's the linebackers or the nickelbacks, so even at some point, the safeties might have to come down and cover those particular areas. It's going to be a challenge for Notre Dame this week.
My number 5, Shaun, it's going to be in your dudes need to be dudes breakdown, and it's going to be Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. Christian Gray didn't play a great game against A&M. I thought he had a solid game. He had the bad pass interference. Overall, I thought Christian played good football. I don't think they put him in as many situations I wanted, but he was very active. He had multiple breakups. I thought he was pretty good, but he wasn't great. Leonard Moore had probably his worst game at Notre Dame, in my opinion, in the opener. And you need these two to be better than what they were. And look, you're facing very good receivers. I would argue better than what you face in week 1 as a unit. You need your dudes to be dudes. You're going to have to, that means tackling well. That means trusting your technique, not getting grabby, not holding down the field, not overplaying things. Now, yes, they have to be put in better position by the coach. There's no question. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but at the end of the day, I can't blame the coach for you getting lazy with your technique and getting beat on a double move on the last play and a half. I can't blame the coach for that. I can blame the coach for other things, but you still have to do your job better. And I've seen Leonard Moore play like a star. Everybody has bad games. Benjamin Morrison had a couple bad games in his career. Todd Light had a couple bad games in his career. Julian Love had a couple bad games in his career. Every stud, Kyle Hamilton, Xavier Watts, Harrison Smith, everybody has bad games. This isn't me overreacting. I'm simply saying, look, fact is, he didn't have a very good game. Now, week 2, it's time to make up for it, both of you. You're dudes. You're in my opinion, the best cornerback tandem in college football. The best cornerback tandem in college football. To win a game like this at home, you got to play like the best cornerback room in college football. If they play their game, A&M's going to have a tough time throwing the football in this game. Consistently. They'll make their plays. Consistently. And if that forces then Marcel Reed to throw more over the middle, that's when turnovers start to happen. They didn't do that against Miami. And so that's why I think these guys are at the bottom. The last on my list, I should say, is your stars got to play like stars, Shaun. And a lot of this breakdown is that Drake Bowen's got to play like a stud because he is a stud. Don Schuler's got to play like a stud because he is a stud. Bryce Young's got to play like a stud because he is a stud. And you need Leonard Moore and Christian Gray to play like studs because they are studs. And when your dudes aren't playing like the dudes they are in big games, you're going to have a harder time winning. And that's why my last one is these two guys, because they are talented players. And as I said before, there's no one in the chat, neither one of us, no fan watching the show at any point in time is going to be more upset about how Leonard Moore played in the opener than Leonard Moore. But Leonard Moore, I also think, is a kid that understands, okay, I played poorly. Let's make the corrections and go play ball. That's it. Just go be you. You don't have to do anything extraordinary. You don't got to make up for what you did in the opener. You just got to play your game. That's it. Because you are a stud. Christian Gray, play your game. Trust your technique. Don't go outside of who you are to go make a play. Same thing for Adon. Don't go outside of who you are to go make a play. Play your game. You struggled in the opener because you didn't play your game. And I think they will. I'm actually confident in these two guys stepping up and playing better. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I am.
I expected every player in college, especially when you have such a meteoric rise as Leonard Moore had, you knew he was going to reach a place of being challenged at some point. And I expected it to be in his sophomore year. But I think usage, let's talk about usage. I think a part of that goes into Leonard Moore didn't play like he played last year, especially on some key third downs early. He was getting beat on some, intermediate routes and some comeback routes. And it's like, wait a minute. I've seen him, Jeremiah Smith, like eat that up and like be right there. Like, why is there 1 to 2 yards of separation? And I wonder if whether or not what they were being asked to do was on their mind in that game, or whether a shift in certain things that they might be asked to do in certain situations when they were just used to. It's like when you come out every week and hey, if a call comes in and it's not man to man, bump and run, then we're shocked. Like we know what we're going to, we do what we do. This is what we do. And so when you have somebody else come in that you have to adjust to that's asking you to do certain things in certain situations, I felt like they didn't play. And then, like you said, watching the film, Leonard Moore had arguably his worst game that he's played at Notre Dame. And then Christian Gray had a couple of moments that weren't good, right? Out of the 70 plays, you look at 2 moments, and that's when we overreact to certain positions in football, right? Cornerback is one of those things, right? Like 2 mistakes out of like 10 attempts or 10 targets, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, right? And look at Leonard Moore, but in the second half, Leonard Moore did kind of recover, right? And you saw him end up, I think, on Tony's last 2 targets, he was the defender that kind of shut him down when they wanted to go back to him and keep situations. So he did recover. So, like you said, I'm interested in seeing how the defensive coordinator becomes comfortable with them and how they become more comfortable with what they're being asked to do. That might be a little tweak here or there from what they're used to, right? But at the end of the day, I agree with you. I can't think of another combination on the outside that I would rather have in the nation. And that's what the falls in all. What you saw from last week. Run it back. I'm good to have both of those guys. So I agree with that. They have to be dudes, though. I thought about the Leonard Moore thing. I thought about that. Like he's gonna have to be a dude. Like it makes, if you could just take away one half of the field, or you make offenses feel like we're not going to that side. That hurts them. That hurts their game. So
agree.
He has to be a dude. I totally agree with you on that one, bro.
I look, Shaun, like, okay, so you look at the line on this game, right? Notre Dame's a 6.5-point favorite on FanDuel. The over-under in this game, according to FanDuel, is 50.5. And I have them go. I have my prediction I did yesterday. I have Notre Dame winning 31-27. I have them going over, and I was really kind of bummed about that, to be honest with you. It's like, yes, A&M's defense has improved, or offense has improved. There's no question their offense has improved, Shaun. It's a much more dangerous offense this year than it was last year, when you had big, tall, not very fast receivers, and you were kind of a stagnant offense, and that just kind of played a little bit into Notre Dame's hands. Yeah, they're better, but they shouldn't be 27 points better, in my opinion. And the offense I felt was like more nuanced. It was like this guy leading to this guy, and this guy leading to that guy, and this helps this, and this helps that. This defensive one is much different, Shaun. If Notre Dame is going to like go with, get the under, right? If they're going to win this game, and then also kind of get the under, hold A&M under what people expect them to perform in this game. This is more about just your guys stepping up. Yes, Chris Ash has got to do a better job. There's nothing we can do about that. There's nothing you as players can do about what play calls Chris Ash makes. There's nothing you can do about it. What you can do is go out there and be that dude on each play. You say, look, on this play, I'm going to go out there and do my job as well as I can and as hard as I can. This one's a little bit different. It's just, you've got studs. They got to step up and play like studs. I mean, it really is, in a lot of ways, Shaun, that simple. It really is. And, we're going to see if we're going out there this weekend. We're going to see if they can. And if they are, then this is the side of the ball that if this side of the ball really steps up and plays at a high level tomorrow night, I'm going to be like, all right, we're good. Like we're good. Like it was just look, guys. It was just that stumbling block game. They have it every year. It's why I predict them to go 11-1. Sean, I don't know what your preseason prediction was. You weren't on the show with us that game. I went 11-1. People say, who do you have them losing to? No idea. It'll be somebody. If they go out and play the way they need to on defense against A&M, I'll be like, even if they only win 17-13, offense is still a work in progress. I'm like, I'm fine. I know the offense is going to be fine. I need the defense to get back to playing like that Notre Dame defense. If that happens in this game, my view of the season, which right now is a little murky, is going to get cleared up again. It'll be like that moves, everything clears up. The sun shines down the next day. The angels are singing in the heavens. It's like, all right, everything is right in the Notre Dame world once again because the Notre Dame defense looked like the Notre Dame defense again. And that's going to come down to your dudes got to play like dudes. It really, to me, it's not simple, but it's simple to say. It's obviously harder to execute, but it's very simple to say. I think it is that. And it's for both of us. We're talking about Boubacar and Bryce Young and Jason Onye and Drake Bowen and Kingston and Leonard Moore, Christian Gray and Don Schuler. Those are your dudes, man. We're not putting this on Carson Hobbs and Devontae Smith. We're not putting this on Jalen Sneed and Jaden Alsbury and Luke Talich and guys like that. No, we're putting this on the dudes. You guys got to step up and play like dudes. And, that's going to be a key for this defense, in my opinion. Dudes got to be dudes.
Agreed.
So that's going to do it for part 2 of our show today. We are going to jump into next some conversation about college football. And so before we get there, do us a favor, folks. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And as always, the best way to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown is to go to our premium board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for an annual or a monthly membership. You can also, if you want to help us out and support us beyond the normal rate, you can sign up for one of our booster club options. We have blue, we have Shamrock, blue, and gold. And if you sign up for one of those, you get a little IB gear in return. So, Sean, you don't have an IB club mug over at your house, do you? I don't have one. Do you have an IB Gold Club t-shirt? Neither do I. That's because the only people that get those are booster club members. I don't get them. My staff doesn't get them. My wife doesn't get one. She's not happy about not having a Gold Club mug or an IB Club mug, by the way. But I said, babe, that's only for members of the booster club. So you can go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, sign up for that, and become part of our booster club, and you get some free IB merch in return. So you find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Part 3 of our show today is we're going to talk college football, Sean. And this is always a fun part of our show because you and I obviously love Notre Dame football. We're Notre Dame football fans. We've been Notre Dame football fans our whole life. But we also both love college football. We also both know that you got to pay attention to college football. If you want to know how Notre Dame stacks up, you got to follow the rest of the game. And we love talking about the rest of the sport. And there's several topics we thought about talking about this weekend, but I really felt like it was important to kind of look at, talk about the hot seat right now, because some of the things we saw, especially in week 2, the hot seat became a lot more relevant for certain coaches. And then there's some others that have some opportunities coming up. So you and I sat down, we talked, and we came up with a list of players a list of coaches, I should say, that we think are hot seat coaches whose seat is either hotter because of early season results, or so far they're doing good, but now you enter that stretch of the season where you're going to be defined. And so we're going to go through that, and we're going to start down in the SEC, Sean, with a hot seat coach who went into last season with everybody assuming he was going to get fired. We're talking about Billy Napier at Florida. Had some early season losses, got spanked by Miami, and got spanked by A&M, and everybody's like, well, it's over. He's done. Rallies, leads his team to an 8-5 record. Have a huge win over Ole Miss late in the season. Even in some of their losses, like you gain some respect for them. Like they really battled Georgia really hard until DJ Lagway got knocked out. They beat LSU by 11. The end of the season on a 4-game win streak. They were 4-5 after a blowout loss to Texas. Beat LSU at home by 11. Beat Ole Miss at home by a touchdown. Go on the road, spank Florida State. And then in your bowl game, you spanked a shorthanded Tulane team. So now Florida comes into the year. They're getting way too much hype. They're a top 10 or 15, 20 team by a lot of people. And you go in week 2 at home against South Florida and you get beat. in a game where it was like that looked a lot like the version of Florida that, you know, poor offense, no creativity, terrible, just silly, bad mistakes. And you're like, that's the stuff that can get you beat and get a coach fired. That's where Billy Napier is. And right now, the seat is really hot. I mean, I didn't even see posts about should Billy Napier be fired. Everything I saw was like, who's the next coach going to be at Florida? It's just assumed. Well, if you look at Florida's schedule the rest of the way, Shaun, he's got plenty of moments with the opportunity to salvage his season, but it's got to start now. I read this off yesterday, Shaun. This is the craziest thing. This is Florida's schedule from now to the end of the year. At LSU this weekend, we'll talk about that. At Miami, bye week, home against Texas, at Texas A&M, home against Mississippi State, who just beat a top 20 Arizona State team, versus bye week, neutral site game against Georgia, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, home against Tennessee, home against Florida State. Trev pointed this out yesterday, Shaun. 8 of their final 10 opponents are currently not only ranked, but ranked in the top 20. It doesn't get any easier after the South Florida game for Billy Napier. He's in a situation against LSU, Shaun, that if he doesn't win this weekend, I'm not saying he's going to get fired. I will say I just don't know how he recovers with what's left on the schedule. What say you?
I'm going to look at this from, I would love for Brian Smith to tap in on this. This is his wheelhouse. I think the evolution of recruiting has damaged the Florida schools more than any other in-state powers in college football. Because I think the programs were so built for years on getting the talent in-state that all of the restrictions now to where you just can't load up on talent on your roster now affects them to the point that they have to make sure that they get the right kids in state. It's like they just can't bring all the kids in and just say, okay, we'll see who the best are. Like, because if you miss and you get the wrong kid, he ends up going out of state to Notre Dame, or he goes to Penn State, or he goes to Michigan. Man, that miss hits a lot harder than it did 10 years ago when you could stack the roster with all of the in-state kids. So I think that's a perspective. Recruiting in those Florida schools, Florida State, Florida, that's why you've seen them all be inconsistent. Like they'll have a peak and all of a sudden they'll have a fall off because they're not stacking the roster year after year. And so finding the right guy to come in there has been difficult. And I think that he gave hope, but that hope was really linked to recruiting one player. And the fact that the defense did play well.
He's not ready to be that kind of guy.
Yeah. No, he's not. And the defense played well. The defense played well last week against USF.
Well, they get beat. They played 16 points.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for the most part,
18, excuse me.
The defense is there, but I just don't, that offense is it's a couple of steps behind, you know, and it just is what it is. And they struggle. And they struggled in the trenches, you know, just while USF really dominated in the trenches in that game. So
no excuse for that, Shaun.
No
excuse for that. No. Look, I'm not, when it comes to sports, I sometimes have a you reap what you sow view on things.
Yeah.
You fired a football coach and Dan Mullen a year after he had your school playing in the SEC championship game. You fired Dan Mullen after a stretch of where they had won 10 games, 11 games, 8 games. That was during the COVID year. They played in the SEC championship and lost to the Bama national championship team by 6. That year, they lost to a ranked 9-1 A&M team by 3 on the road. They lost to LSU by 3. They lost to Alabama by 6. And then they went out in the bowl game and just got obliterated. But like that season, they also beat number 5 Georgia by 16 points. They beat Ole Miss on the road by 16 points. They beat South Carolina by 14 points. They beat Arkansas by 28 points, Vanderbilt by 21 points, Kentucky by 24 points, and Tennessee on the road by 12 points. A year later, they get off to a rough start, and you fired the football coach who had the success that he had in the first 3 years. And by the way, that football coach inherited a football team that went 4-7 the year before he arrived. And in his first year, they went 10-3 his first year. His second year, they went 11-2, won the Orange Bowl. First year, they won the Peach Bowl. In his second year, they go 5-6, and they fired him. You kind of brought this on yourself a little bit. This is karma a little bit for Florida. Like you kind of are in this world of, hey, if you're not Urban Meyer, you're gone. Like, well, okay, Urban Meyer's Urban Meyer for a reason. And let me remind you that outside of like 1 year of Galen Hall, if Steve Spurrier wasn't either your quarterback, your coach, or Urban Meyer wasn't your coach, you're a barely over 500 football program for the entirety of your history that's not linked to either Steve Spurrier or Urban Meyer. And you fired a coach after that, and then what do you get? What do you get to replace him? What have you gotten from Billy Napier in the time since? 6-7, 5-7, 8-5, and you're staring at a losing record right now. So I kind of don't feel bad for Florida. I kind of feel like you brought this on yourself. You brought this on yourself. I promise you that if Dan Mullen was the head football coach of Florida, I don't know that they'd be SEC title contenders, but I'm pretty sure they'd have been better than they were under Billy Napier. And Dan Mullen had his issue. I mean, he wasn't recruiting the way he needed to. There were issues there that needed to be addressed. But I just find it like, you know what? You kind of brought this on yourself. And the question is, if you do fire Billy Napier, who's going to want that job right now? I don't know that that's as attractive of a job as Florida. And this is why I think they ended up with Billy Napier. I don't think Florida's as attractive of a job as the Florida people think that it is. Which is why they ended up with Billy. They didn't. I mean, I know Billy Napier was a candidate, but I know there was other candidates beyond him that they looked at when they fired Dan Mullen. And now you're kind of you are where you are. You hired a guy who's a pretty good Group of 5 coach to try to be a good Power 4 coach, and he's not. And here we are. So I don't really feel terrible for Florida in this situation. But looking at Billy Napier, I feel a little bit kind of somewhat bad for him because I don't like when coaches get fired. But, Shaun, I just don't know how they recover from that South Florida loss. They needed that game so bad when you look at what's coming up. They couldn't afford a loss like that. But I feel like if you beat LSU this weekend, you kind of reset things a little bit because if you'd have looked at their preseason schedule, you'd have been like, they're going to be 2-1 going in, into that week 4 game. I mean, like they're going to be 2-1. They're going to beat Long Island. They're going to beat South Florida. They're going to lose to LSU, and they're going into that September 20 game against Miami, 2-1, ranked in the top 20, with a chance to, go beat a Miami team that beat them last year. They got a shot to beat. But now you're 1-1 going into the LSU game at LSU. Boy, it's going to be tough. But they need this game. I just don't know if he can recover if they don't win this game.
And I don't feel good about their chances this week. I just don't. I really I'm going to be honest, man. I really like the feel of this LSU team.
Their defense looks very different.
It seems like they have a toughness, that is going to bode well for them throughout this schedule because they have a pretty good schedule as well. But no, I don't feel good about Billy Napier. I think sometimes as an administration, you can be given hope in the waning moments of the season that will encourage you to stay with a coach or the direction of the program. And the truth of the matter is Florida should have just moved on. Mm-hmm. They should have moved on, right? Yeah. I don't even really think it would have been a gutsy move or something that people didn't, I truly believe that, yeah, they're going to be a year too late concerning Billy Napier, which might have cost them a chance at some people.
The interesting thing is, I don't know if they're going to want to go hire the coaches that are the hot coaches right now, including the guy that beat them last week. You know, John Sumrall, Tulane. Like, will they want to go the G5 route again after with Billy Napier? That's the problem with schools like Florida is they kind of get their sights set on, well, I saw Rido Anthony, great receiver at Florida, back under Steve Spurrier. There was somebody said, you know, who should be the next head football coach at Florida? And he tweets Marcus Freeman. That was it. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but that's not a better job than Notre Dame. You know, like there's not a lot of coaches that are at big time programs that are winning that are going to leave their current spots for Florida. Like, it's just there's not a lot of great options out there at the Power 4 level of proven commodities are going to want that job. And so I think they're in a tough spot, but I think they will have to make that move this year. Number 2 coach on the list, Shaun, is another guy that I think his fate has been sealed by the start to this season. That's Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. Obviously, took over for Justin Fuente. Back-to-back mediocre seasons. They fired him, brought in Brent Pry from Penn State, known as a good recruiter. They went 3-8 in year 1, 7-6 in year 2, won their bowl game. Went 6-7 last year, lost their bowl game. So basically, they've gone 6-6 the last 2 years. And then this season, you start off and you've got some great opportunities early in the season, Shaun, to earn some key wins. You've got South Carolina neutral field in Atlanta. You got a home game against Vanderbilt. Your chance to get some redemption. You have Old Dominion coming up this weekend. Wofford coming up next weekend. Then you play at NC State. Then you got Wake Forest before you have to go to Georgia Tech. Your schedule was set up pretty nicely for you to be 5-2, 4-2 to start the season. And while that's still possible, they then start the season 0-2. They were never really competitive against South Carolina. Like, it was a close game, but you never felt like they were going to actually be able to score on South Carolina. It was just about when is South Carolina going to score. And then this past week, it's a close game for a while. And then fourth quarter, Vanderbilt just dominates them, just running the ball down their throat, big plays, turnovers, just really physically whipped Virginia Tech in the fourth quarter at home. And you're just kind of like, I don't know how he recovers from that. They got Old Dominion this weekend, Shaun. I'll ask you, is the 0-2 start and the way they've lost these 2 games, is it too much for Brent Pry to recover from at Virginia Tech in year 4 with going into the season with a career record of 16-23? The schedule they've got coming up, let's go to their 25 schedule. They got Old Dominion and Wofford the next 2 weeks. Then you're at NC State, home against Wake Forest, at Georgia Tech, home against Cal, home against Louisville, at Florida State, home against Miami, at Virginia. That game at Virginia doesn't look like the cakewalk that some people thought it was going to be. Maybe that streak finally ends, So, man, he's in a tough spot.
Once again, I think this is back to my group. I think his seat is, an inferno right now. I think he gets close to it, and there's no way he can even sit down. That's how hot it is right now. And it goes back to the evolution of recruiting. Like schools like Virginia Tech, because of where they were, could quietly go under the radar and be really good because they were in the middle of a recruiting hotbed that a lot of people didn't even know about. You talk about the DMV, you talk about the Carolinas, like they just went and got kids and was strong on development and strong on fundamentals and making teams beat you. Then they would go get a dynamic player, quarterback, and they were physical up front. They had a running game and just great coaching. And then, like, as things change from a recruiting standpoint, the overflow of the domino from other big-time programs not being able to stack and stay regional by stacking, now they had to spread out. And so now you had these schools like Virginia Tech or a Pitt that Pitt could mine the Pennsylvania area and build. And now you had all these schools now coming to your area and grabbing kids that would normally go to Virginia Tech, right? And so just the domino effect of how this recruiting has changed. And I think it's just very difficult for a program like Virginia Tech and how they became so successful to continue that trend because of how recruiting has changed. And I don't know if they have the resources to be a national recruiting program and kind of spread out like other programs. So maybe the right guy in there can do it and bring attention back to Virginia Tech.
You're going to need the right guy. You're going to need some Kurt Signetti type of guy.
Yeah.
Who can identify and evaluate those under the radar talented kids that right now are going to NC State and North Carolina and schools like that. Like that's what Virginia Tech used to make a killing on, Shaun. Like Michael Vick was a stud. Nobody thought he was a stud coming out of high school because everybody's like, he's not even close to being as good as Ronald Curry was. And he wasn't in high school, if we're being honest. You know, they went out and got Chiron Stitt out of Western Range. He used to clean up in the 757, cleaned up in the 757. They recruited that state incredibly well. Well, it's a little harder now because more and more people are coming into the state. That's fine. They used to make a living finding those under-the-radar kids in Pennsylvania. You talked about Pennsylvania. They did a great job going up there. And they would get the occasional stud up there, too. Remember, they got Kevin Jones at running back, beat Penn State for him. He was a 5-star player. They would go down to North Carolina and find kids. They'd go down to Florida and find those underrated athletes that would come there and become studs. They got the occasional stud, and I'm not going to act like they did. And obviously, D'Angelo Hall was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. But, you know, you remember, what was the name of the edge player they had? Corey Brown on that team that played for the title. You know, you had Andre Hall at wide receiver. You had Chiron Stitt at running back. They weren't big-time recruits coming out of high school. But they did a great job cleaning up on the East Coast, from Pennsylvania on down to Florida, finding those under-the-radar kids. You need a great evaluator at Virginia Tech. You need a great recruiter at Virginia Tech, and you need a guy that flat out knows how to coach. And that's what they had in Frank Beamer. And that's, I mean, look, if Indiana can win and be a playoff team, Shaun, Virginia Tech can win and be a playoff team. There's no question about it. I mean, they've got a quarterback now they should be able to win with, but they don't know how to use them. They don't know how to develop them. It's just not a good staff. It's not a good development staff. It's not a great recruiting staff. You need the right coach. And hopefully you can find a guy that wants to be there for a while. Somebody said to me, like, should they go after Shane Beamer? I'm like, why would Shane Beamer go to Virginia Tech? Like he's building his own legacy at South Carolina. He'll never live up to his dad's legacy. His dad is one of the greatest coaches of all time in that level of below the all-time greats, right? Like there's this list of like just coaches that did a great job and at a school where I don't know that anyone can ever do what they do at that school. And so I don't, but I think they can be better than this. There's no excuse for even the current roster they've had the last 2 years should have been better than what it was. That's my problem. And I think sometimes people look at a school that's struggling saying, I just don't know if they can relive the glory days. Well, what are Virginia Tech's glory days? It's not winning titles. They played for the title once, but you're consistently a top 20 to 25 team. And you pulled off the occasional upset over Miami or a Florida State. But you weren't regularly beating Florida State. You were just giving them a game. And that's what Virginia Tech can absolutely be that, in my opinion, with the right coach. It's one of those schools that not just anybody can win at. You do need the right coach. You need a bit of a unique personality and hope that you can get him to stay. That's where they're at. I don't know who that guy is, but I'm pretty sure it's not Brent Pry. So he's a hot seat coach, Shaun, that I think who started the season put him in a spot where he hasn't been able to recover from. Let's go to the next hot seat coach, and this is one that Notre Dame fans are going to talk a lot more about in a couple weeks. That's Sam Pittman at Arkansas. So obviously Sam Pittman came into the season on the hot seat. Nobody disputes that. Sam Pittman's – I honestly think Sam Pittman is still at Arkansas for one reason and one reason only, Shaun. I do. It's because he's a good dude. I do. I think he's a likable guy, and I've said this a bunch of times. If you're a likable guy, more often than not, you'll get more chances than maybe – you would if you were kind of a jerk. Maybe, that's my opinion of him, but he's 32-31. He was 29. He was 30 and 31 going into the season, coming off of a 7-6 year. They went to the Liberty Bowl and won. Went 3-7 in his first year, 9-4, 7-6, 4-8, 7-6, 2-0 to start the season. The 2-0 is expected. They played Alabama, A&M, and Arkansas State to start the season. Now they blew both of those teams out, which is good. They have an opportunity this weekend, Shaun, to make a statement for Sam Pittman as a coach and a team. They go to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has looked solid to start the season, not great. This is the kind of road win that a coach like Sam Pittman needs to kind of show that, hey, we've turned the corner a little bit as a program. It makes them more attractive on the recruiting trail. It makes them more attractive in the portal. There's just a lot of things there. This is a school that's got decent money. Obviously right now a lot of it's going to the basketball program, but there's some money there. This is a big game for them, Shaun, this weekend. I think 3-0 with a win at Ole Miss, barring an absolute collapse the rest of the way. I look at their schedule at Memphis the next week. That's winnable. They home against Notre Dame. Let's say they lose that game. They got at Tennessee. That'll be tough. But then they're home against A&M, home against Auburn, home against Mississippi State. And then they finish the year at LSU, at Texas, home against Missouri. They beat Ole Miss this weekend and Memphis the weekend after that. Even if they lose to Notre Dame and Texas and some of those better teams, they're a 8-4 football team. And you're feeling like, all right, they're starting to turn the corner a little bit, in my opinion. That's where I'm at. So I think this is a big game for him. This is a big 2 weeks for Sam Pittman.
That's fair to say. And like you said, I can go back all the way to the recruitment of Charles Jagasaw. His second favorite head coach probably was Sam Pittman. It's probably why Arkansas stayed in his recruitment as late as they did, along with Michigan and Notre Dame. So it's great to I think he does bring a style of play to Arkansas that people love, like physical play, trenches, offensive line is usually very solid. They've had some talent at the skill positions. I don't know if they've had difference-making talent quite yet.
It's been a little bit since they've had that. Like since they've had like a Darren McFadden, Felix Jones,
Felix Jones, that type. Yeah, but it's tough-minded on defense. Always seem to be in games, especially when they get the best teams to come to Fayetteville. But just haven't been able to get over the hump, right? And so that can be as simple as just having those difference makers, or as we call them, gap closers, on your squad. And it's going to be an interesting matchup. Like you said it for a long time. Notre Dame this year defensively faces diverse quarterback play and much better quarterback play than they faced last year. So that's going to be something that we have to sit back and watch. But has he hit his head up against the ceiling, per se, at Arkansas? Is this who he is? Is this who this program is? That's something that the people at Arkansas have to ask themselves.
And that's what I think the next 2 weeks are going to tell us, Shaun. Like when you look at after this 2-game road streak against Ole Miss and Memphis, they play Notre Dame, at Tennessee, Texas A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, at LSU, at Texas, home against Missouri. Let's say they lose to Notre Dame and at Tennessee. And then let's say they hold serve at home, beat A&M, beat Auburn, beat Mississippi State. They lose at LSU, lose at Texas, and then end the season with a win over Missouri. People are going to look back at the schedule and say, boy, you guys beat Ole Miss on the road. You beat a scrappy Memphis team on the road. You guys beat a really good Texas A&M team at home. You beat an improved Auburn team at home. You beat an improved Mississippi State team at home. You beat a pretty good Missouri team on the road, and you battled in a home loss to Notre Dame. You battled in a road loss to Tennessee, and you battled in a road loss to LSU and Texas. 8-4 football team. You're like, you know what? I feel good about where we are. And I just feel like this is the kind of stretch that puts him in position. Whereas if you lose one of these 2 games, are you going to be able to go 7-5 and 6-6? And I'm just telling you, it's not that big of a difference. 8-4, 9-3 is way different in the minds of fans and boosters than 7-5, 6-6. Way different. And these are the kind of games you got to pull some upsets. And I think, the reason I bring up Ole Miss now is because I think Ole Miss is kind of there for the taking a little bit. They haven't looked like world beaters the first couple of weeks. You got a lot of new faces that are still kind of learning the system and those type of things. And I just feel like this is
still banged up too, right?
Yep. Austin Simmons a little banged up. We'll see if he plays this weekend. This is just, you need to have this kind of win, in my opinion. You've got to be able to go on the road and win some big games in the SEC, or you're just not going to be a good football team. And I think if they go 7-5 again this year, Shaun, then I think you start to get to the point where it's like, yeah, this is just kind of who they are. This is just who they are. And then you got to decide, is that good enough for us at Arkansas? And knowing most SEC teams, I don't know that that's going to be something that they view as good enough. And then plus you got Bobby Petrino sitting in the wings, as your offensive coordinator. There's going to be some people that look at it and say, hey, maybe he is. But I feel like if you go 8-4, maybe somehow pull off 9-3, now, Shaun, you're talking about you've led him to bowl games for the last 5 years, and you're trending in the right direction. Now, all of a sudden, that 4-8 season from 2023 looks like an anomaly. And you've had some big wins. You beat Tennessee last year. I mean, so I think that's why I say I think this is a big stretch for him. Next coach on the list, and I'll tell you, this is a coach who surprised me. Justin Wilcox at Cal. They got a big game this weekend. Justin Wilcox is kind of one of those guys that people just kind of, the way they talk about him, it's like dead man walking as a football coach. Just hasn't been able to get Cal over the hump. And they've 6-7 the last 2 years, 4-8 in 2022, 5-7 the year before that. Honestly, what's funny is I think Justin Wilcox has done a heck of a job. They're getting no support at that school. I mean, no, Cal and Stanford haven't supported their football teams at all in this new era. He lost his entire backfield to the portal in the spring, and lost some after the season, lost the rest in the spring, had to start over. They come out this season, Shaun, and I'm like, they're just not going to be very good. And they win their opener at Oregon State 34-15, and they whooped Texas Southern. They get Minnesota at home before they go to San Diego State. This is a big game, Shaun, for Justin Wilcox. You can start this year 3-0 with all the personnel losses. It may not be enough to save your job at Cal. He may not want to save his job at Cal. He may be like, can I do good enough to get me a job somewhere else? Who knows? But I think this is a big game for him. Really good start to the season based on expectations. Their schedule is not, in my opinion, brutal. They play at Minnesota at home, then they're at San Diego State, at BC, home against Duke, home against North Carolina, at Virginia Tech, home against Virginia, at Louisville, at Stanford, home against SMU. That's not a brutal schedule. You take them to a bowl game again, and all of a sudden, you're going to be harder to fire. And if you do get fired, you're going to have an easier landing spot. Unless you have a job you can go get before they fire you. So which I think Cal would love that if he took another job, because then they don't have to pay his buyout. They get paid, and then they have to fire him and pay his buyout, and they go hire somebody else. So I think this is a big game for Justin Wilcox and Cal.
Life comes at you fast, because he was a hot name in head coaching circles and respected. And I think the job he was doing, even the job he did last year with the team that he had. I mean, Jaden Ott was never healthy, really. And, the job he did with Mendoza, and then Mendoza goes over to Indiana.
Tobias Merriweather, transferred from Notre Dame, has a great spring. He's expected to be their go-to receiver, and then he gets hurt in fall camp. Absolutely. He was never the same. They lost Michael Sturdivant. Yeah.
Yeah. They had Miami beat last year.
They got screwed in that game, by the way.
And got screwed in that game. Yes. So Justin Wilcox, for him to be in this position now, even I think he brought them into Notre Dame Stadium.
Mm-hmm. Yes, lost 24-17.
Yeah, they played well. So you thought, okay, this program it's a really good coach. They're on the rise, and here we sit talking about him possibly being on the hot seat.
Beat Auburn at Auburn last year. Yeah. He's done a good job, Shaun. I agree. So this is a big game for them. If he can win this game, I think they've got a shot to once again be a bowl team, and he's continued to build his name. It is wild that he has fallen the way he has, and I keep telling people that says a lot more about Cal than it does Justin Wilcox. Sometimes going 6-7 is getting the most out of your program, and I don't know I don't know if anybody could have got more out of that team last year than he did. To your point, I don't know if they could. Next coach is on the list, Shaun. This is doesn't play this weekend, but coming off of a brutal game, Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. And I've always felt like, look, some coaches should kind of have a lifetime opportunity, but there's really no such thing. There gets a point in time where it's like it's just not working anymore. And he played quarterback at Oklahoma State. He was the quarterback for Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas back in the 80s. He's done a tremendous job at Oklahoma State over the years, Shaun. I mean, really, in my opinion, the greatest coach they've ever had. He's been there since 2005. They've had 11-win seasons, a 12-win season. They should have played for the national championship in 2011. They got completely screwed. Won 10 games in 2013, had 3 straight years of 10 wins from 15 to 17, had a 12-win season as recently as 2021, beat Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, went 10-4 in 2023, played in the Big 12 championship game that year, went 3-9 last year. And it's like, okay, is that an anomaly? Are they going to be able to bounce back? Where is this program at? I don't think he's handled the new world of college football very well. And you go out last week, and I don't think anybody expected them to go out and beat Oregon at Oregon. I don't think any expected them to really even be all that competitive against Oregon at Oregon. But you run your mouth about him during the week, and I get what he was saying. I don't think it was as bad as what people made it out to be, but it's kind of like, dude, but you kind of went out there and put him on blast and started making excuses, kind of pissed Oregon off, and they ran it up a little bit, beat him 69-3. You get to a point like that, sometimes there's just those losses in the tenure that no matter how great you've been, there's no recovering from this. And look, Mike Gundy's going to have to figure something out real quick because this team has looked shook against Oregon. They have Tulsa coming up next weekend. It's a chance to kind of get right. And then you've got Baylor at home, at Arizona, home against Houston, home against Cincinnati before you got to play 3 of your next 4 games on the road. He's going to have to right this ship real fast. Because if he doesn't, I don't know that you can recover from a game like that without a long winning streak. And there was already some people that wanted him out anyway. I think that's the game that can give the people that want you out the ammo they need to go out there and get you fired when you lose a game that bad. And yes, Oregon ran it up, but they didn't run it up that bad, Shaun. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like they went out and scored 30 in the fourth quarter. You know how many points they scored in the fourth quarter? 0. Their running it up was in the third quarter. And it was 41-0 at halftime, 41-3 at halftime, and they came out in the third quarter and just put 28 points on the board. And then didn't score a single point in back-to-back pick sixes. Didn't score a single point in the fourth quarter. If Dan Lanning wanted to, he could have scored over 80 in that game, maybe more. When they were going for 20 a pop in that game, Shaun, that's bad. You lost 69-3, and the other team did not score in the fourth quarter. That's hard to recover from.
I want to say this because when I heard him speak about, the difference between the spending between his program and Oregon, I had a tiny bit of empathy for him. Because once again, going back to what we said about Coach Pry and Virginia Tech, it's just certain, you want to call them boutique college football programs, like, dude, they have to do it a certain way. I think losing Oklahoma, losing Texas impacts because you have eyes on Oklahoma and Texas in your conference, then automatically there's going to be an attraction for your program because you play both of those teams every year. And so I think Oklahoma State was a little injured and hurt by the defections of Oklahoma and Texas. And then the resources, man, I mean, just the changes and not having the guy in place to adapt, right? It doesn't seem like he's adapting to what is being asked. I mean, that program was very much built on, like you said, heavy in the JUCOs, heavy in the transfers, and then going out and just being able to get some guys in that Big 12 country, Big 12 recruiting pipeline that fell through the cracks of Texas and Oklahoma, and then developing that. That's how everything was built for him. And so things have shifted, and you can't build it or operate it along those lines anymore. Or once again, like Virginia Tech, can the right guy now come in and kind of breathe new life into that program?
Can I make a statement that I'm curious if this is what you mean? I actually think schools like that can build it the same way. in it from a development and coaching standpoint, how you build it that way is different. Like, you are still going to build it with finding those under the radar kids, developing things like that. Now, getting them requires a different process. Keeping them requires a different process, but you can still go out and recruit that way, in my opinion. You just have to embrace the things that go into keeping them. And so, like, I'd say at a place like Oklahoma State, I'd probably spend less money on recruiting and more money on retention. You know what I mean? Like,
they would never have a choice in that. They're never going to spend like Texas, Oklahoma, in the big school.
Exactly.
So that's the standard. My point is, you don't have that automatic Big 12 connection to Texas and Oklahoma. We don't get this kid. Guess what? Play them every year. Now you don't have that. Now you have to come up with a new plan within the confines of who you are.
But I think they still do get those. They can still get those kids now. Because those kids, where are those kids going? They're not going to, they're not going to Texas and Oklahoma. They can still get those kids. You have to go about getting them in a different way, is kind of what I'm saying. Like, you maybe have to expand in different parts of the country. I do think you can still recruit those same regions that you recruited before. I get that what you're saying, Shaun. You can't say, hey, you don't have the same pool. Oklahoma and Texas. I get that. But I do think they have the same pool, though. I think it's just you have to get those players differently. That, like, you're going to have to, like their quarterback, Zane Flores. I like that kid a lot. The problem is if he ends up being as good as I think he can be, he's going to play there 2 years and then transfer somewhere else. You're still able to find those kids. They haven't been able to keep those kids there. They lose them all in the portal, and that's the thing that I think is you can still build that way. The process to building that way. And then whether you can keep those players is more of a challenge than it was then, where you could get a kid like they were like every year they were stringing some running back we'd never heard of was pumping out 1,000-yard season. You remember when they were doing that? You can still find those guys. The problem is keeping those guys now that you have them, but you've got to be more willing to embrace the modern era. And too many of these veteran, longtime coaches just weren't. Look, I don't like it either. I don't like the new era either. But it's the reality. And if you want to still coach, then you have to embrace it. And sometimes you can wait so long to embrace it, which I think Mike Gundy took even longer than Dabo did to really embrace it. And I still don't think he's embraced it a whole lot. I think it's more now a necessary evil to him as opposed to something that they've embraced. And that's why I don't think he can get over the hump. So I kind of think we're saying the same thing, Shaun. I still think they may have to go to California more, may have to go to Florida more, but I still think that pool is there, knowing where they're located compared to Texas and Oklahoma. It's just you have to have a different approach. There's no creativity to their offense anymore. That's what people talk about. You get to play against Oklahoma and Texas every year, and that was part of it. But what was even more so is you get to come here and score 40 points a game. You get to come here and throw for a bunch of yards and run for a bunch of yards and catch for a bunch of yards. I think that's the bigger problem for them than not being able to play Texas and Oklahoma anymore. And I think that's something that hurts them more because it's like for Tech, there's more and more schools going into Texas now. Notre Dame's going into Texas now. Like you're telling me they can't buy the players that Texas Tech is buying if they had the resources to do that?
Obviously not.
Exactly. Well, because
I think that's another thing I think he was trying to say. As much as he was talking to Oregon, he was talking to Oklahoma State without making it about Oklahoma State. Like, yo, we spend this much, and they spend that much.
Right.
It's like, okay, yeah, everybody knows what Oregon spends, but maybe people didn't know how little Oklahoma State has been spending in a very much open spending era of college football, like you said, where a Texas Tech is like literally opening up the pockets to go be aggressive and be competitive. That right there, along with what you said, he was, I don't know if I would call him a trailblazer offensively, but he was definitely innovative offensively. He would also bring big time wide receivers. That
were not big time. Justin Blackmon was like the number 97 ranked wide receiver in the country coming out of high school. He'd find these kids, and like Des Bryant didn't turn down Oklahoma, Texas, USC, and Notre Dame to go to Oklahoma State. You know what I mean? Like he'd go find those guys, and they're not finding those guys, Shaun. And you talk about one of the things, like, let's just go to Oklahoma State 2010. Let's just go look at their stats. 2010, Oklahoma State. We can go back a little bit. Yeah, 2010, Oklahoma State scores 44 points a game. 2011, they score 48.7 points a game. 2012, they're at 45.7 points per game. They dropped down to 39.1 in 2013. Then they fall down to 27.6 and 14, jump back up to 39.5 in 2015, 38.6 in 2016, 45 in 2017, 38.4 in 2018. Then it starts to fall off a little bit. They're 32.5 in 19, 30.2 in 20. They're 31.1 in 2021, 30.6, 29.6, 27.2, and then this year they're scoring 15 points a game in their 2 games. It's not as attractive to that pool of players we were talking about anymore. And I think that's the thing, because even if it was more attractive, they could still get some of those kids in. And even if you almost, for some of these schools, you got to treat yourself like a JUCO to a degree. Go find these young kids and, that maybe aren't getting the love, and understand, like, we're going to try to build them up over a couple of years, knowing that a couple of these guys are going to blow up and leave. And that's the world we live in. But you're not finding those players and you're going to have a hard time when you do find them to convince them to come play for you, because they're going to be like, well, why would I go to play for you? I'm going to go play at Baylor. They're scoring points every week. I'm going to go play, for this other team in the Big 12 that's scoring a bunch of points. I'm going to go play for Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, because I'm going to get to throw the ball all around and run for a bunch of yards and catch a bunch of passes. I'm going to come to Oklahoma State and play boring football. Like, I think that's hurt them as much as anything.
That's very much so a key point. But I just want to point out, they can't look. You're not gonna hustle. That you got to be a hustler.
Yeah.
At a school like Oklahoma State, you can't sit back in this era. You got to go hustle and find some kids. You got to go find creative ways to promote your program and get in front of kids and evaluate and hire maybe a different staff. Okay, if you're not going to be, then increase your staff and invest in your staff that's going to be able to go out and connect with kids and get them interested in what you have in Stillwater. Get more innovative minds offensively. Like, maybe you have to do it that way. I think one of the things you talked about, Dabo is starting to evolve, but we question his hires.
Right.
Is it the right offensive coordinator hire? Like, what do you really have there?
It's the right O-line coach, is it right?
Yeah.
Shaun, the last time Oklahoma State scored more than 32.5 points a game was 2018. That means the last time you had an offense that anybody wanted to play in, kids that are rising seniors right now in high school were in middle school, barely out of elementary school. Like, they don't remember. They have no clue who Brandon Whedon is. They have no clue who Des Bryant is. They have no clue who Justin Blackman was. They have no clue who Justin Hill was. They don't have a clue who any of these guys were. I mean, shoot, you got an anchor at ESPN who doesn't know who the freaking heck Barry Sanders is. So you can't sell on what we did 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 years ago as much anymore. You got to be able to figure out how to be that team again now. Now, I understand talent requires you to do that, but look, they could go get all the portal talent in the world, and they're not going to score 40 points a game because they don't have a system anymore that's going to allow them to do that. So, like, that to me is the biggest issue. I think the other one is, like you pointed out, he's clearly doesn't have that grinding staff right now. Like, they are not. It wasn't that long ago he had Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator. Like coaches will go there if you make the right hires and you give them a reason to go there. So I think I just don't know that he recovers from this, Shaun. Now, a coach that I think went into the season on the hot seat that has recovered from what we've seen so far, I'll tell you what, you talk about people saying the game has passed you by and you're just not that guy anymore, and then you go out and make some changes, being open to changing how you play the game. Utah, Kyle Whittingham. Talk about a guy that I don't know that he's had quite as much success as Mike Gundy, but it's pretty close. Even going back all the way to 2008 when they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, went undefeated, had back-to-back 10-win seasons after that. 2015, they won 10 games, won 9 and 16, 9 and 18. 3 of the last 4 years going into 23, they won 11, 10, and 10 games. The only year they won under 10 games was 2020. They only won 3 games. You know why they only won 3 games, Shaun? Because they only played 5. That was in the 2020 COVID year. And then they go 8-5 in 2023. And then last year, the wheels fall off. They go 5-7. And it was an ugly 5-7. There's a lot of people, they can't win anymore. If he could only win when he had, the quarterback that had been there since 2003, that's the only way you could win with him. You had to fire your OC. You're struggling here. You're not able to recruit, blah, 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 blah. He goes out there, makes a great offseason hired offensive coordinator. That guy brings in his quarterback. They do a completely different system offensively. And, bro, the first 2 games of the season, Utah has looked like a very, very different team. They beat UCLA 43-10, and it could have been worse. And then they're coming off a 63-9 win over Cal Poly. And Devin Dampier, through 2 games, looks like that dude. And I told people this offseason, Shaun, and you agreed with me, if you don't know who this kid is, watch Utah early in the season because this kid is fun to watch. I told you who he reminded me of. He is the reincarnation of Woody Dancer. I guess I shouldn't say reincarnation because Woody's still alive, but he's like the second version. He's the modern version of Woody Dancer. He is fun to watch. Their defense is flying around again. They've got an offensive line looking like a Utah offensive line. They don't have any star receivers. They're like 6 of them that can all play. This Utah team could be a force in the Big 12, Shaun, if they can continue to look like they've looked so far. They got a game at Wyoming this weekend. Wyoming's 2-0. They had a 10-0 win over Akron to start the season. Then they had a convincing win over Northern Iowa, who is usually one of the better teams at the FCS level, but they weren't very good last year, and I don't know how good they are this year. But they've got to, start. If you can win that game, you're supposed to win that game. Then your conference schedule starts, Shaun. You've got Texas Tech at home, at West Virginia, home against Arizona State as your first 3 conference games. There's a shot for Utah to go on a long run before they lose a game if they can continue this. And I think the hot seat got turned down a little bit. It's now on like low. And if he can keep rolling, boy, I tell you what, this team can not only win the Big 12, but he can turn that sucker completely off, remove the gas, wires from it, get all that. The stove is off, turn it off. But he had to be willing to reinvent himself a little bit in the modern era. And he's done that, and boy, do they look good so far.
Especially with how the fiscal year has gone with the Big 12 and, the deals that they're making and how they're moving. They need a dominant team, a dominant program, right? That having those 2 or 3 dominant programs at the top of your conference, it means more money. That's what it does. It generates revenue. It generates interest. And the Big 12 really doesn't have those big name programs, that dominant program at the top. And a lot of people thought Utah could be one of those programs when realignment took place. When he can coach his butt off. We've seen it, right? So the expectation was, I think he had to take a step back. It would have been easy for him to rest on his laurels and just say, we just haven't been healthy. But I think, he took a step back and really thought about some things. And their program has so much continuity in it that, moving forward, if they can go and get some difference makers, and Dampier is definitely, possibly one of those difference makers that they can have offensively, they're always going to be solid defensively. So
yeah.
The Big 12 needs them to be what they were starting to become in the Pac-12, which is a consistent contender for the Pac-12 championship. The Big 12 really needs Utah to become that team for them.
A team
and
that
hopefully
could beat
get another team.
They could beat Oregon. They could beat USC. They could beat exactly.
Yeah.
Because they're capable of going out of conference. When they were rolling, they could go out of conference and beat an SEC team. They could beat a Big Ten team. You know what I mean? And like even the game against Ohio State a couple of years ago, I mean, they're playing one of their backup running backs a corner. They were so beat up a corner. And Jackson Smith and Jigba went off. But you know what? Utah stayed in that game the whole game. That was a great bowl game. They are capable of that. Going all the way back to 2008 when they beat Bama, Saban in Alabama with what was his name? It was Brian Johnson at quarterback, right? Back on that team. So yeah, they're capable of being that. And I am They look different stylistically, but they looked a lot like the old school Utah teams. They can run the ball. They play great defense. They don't have any individual first-round draft picks on the skill positions on offense, but they just got a lot of good athletes and football players that can hurt you in different ways, and they've got a quarterback that can do some damage to you. It looked like an old school Utah team. It's just schematically it's different how they're doing it, and then they play great defense. So I got to tell you, Shaun, I've enjoyed that because I think he's one of the good guys in the business, and so you like to see those guys be successful. And so I think he's turned the heat way down on his seat. And if they can go on a run here, I think it completely turns off. And they didn't just beat they didn't just beat UCLA, Shaun. They annihilated UCLA at UCLA 43-10, and it was not that close. Like, it was a dominant performance, man. Now, part of that's UCLA is not very good. But it's also that they looked really good. UCLA is 0-2 right now, and they just lost to UNLV by a touchdown, but they were at least in that game. I texted you during the game. I was like, well, Sean Foster's toast. We don't have him on this show, on this segment, because it's just year 2. I don't know how UCLA is going to view that. I mean, he's just going into year 2, but boy, he's got off to a rough start. But man, they went in and dominated that game. Let's go to the next coach, Shaun. These next 2, as we wrap up, these are not coaches that are currently on the hot seat. But I do think their seats are warming up a little bit, and how the rest of the season goes could determine that. First one is Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. Obviously, they're 2-0, so nice start to the season. But I think everybody expected them to be 2-0 to start the season. They obviously started the season with a home game against Ball State. Then they played Middle Tennessee State in week 2, beat them 42-10. You want to know a little something about Middle Tennessee? They lost by 20 in the opener to Austin Peay. So they're not a very good football team right now. They were 3-9 last year with wins over UTEP, Kennesaw State, and Tennessee Tech. Lost to Ole Miss last year 52-3. So this is not a very good football team. We're going to find out a lot more about Wisconsin here over the next few weeks, Shaun. They obviously play at Alabama this weekend, then they're home against Maryland. Then they have a bye week, then they're at Michigan. These next 3 games for Luke Fickell are going to be huge. And it's not even so much about winning them. They could go 1-2, and then you're like, okay, they're going to be okay if they battle. But they've got at Michigan in a few weeks, but at Alabama this weekend. No one's going to have any kind of ill will towards Luke Fickell if they lose this weekend. Nobody. They just can't get blown out. It's got to be at least a somewhat competitive game where you're like, yeah, they were never going to win that game, but they scrapped and clawed and fought. And then you've got to go out next week, and you've got to beat you've got to beat Maryland next weekend. And I mean, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to figure something out against Michigan. Because the rest of their schedule, they got Iowa at home, which they can win. Ohio State at home, they're going to get cooked. They play at Oregon, they're going to get cooked. They play at Indiana. They have to play Washington at home, Illinois at home, and at Minnesota. There's a lot of potential L's left on their schedule. And so the rest of the year is going to tell us a lot about Wisconsin. And if the opener is any indication, they're in trouble, because if your offense just completely dies because Billy Edwards got hurt, you've got much bigger problems than your starting quarterback got hurt, Shaun.
Yeah. Once again, you're talking about a guy that is really like kind of liked, and a guy who really his tree of assistants and what they've done as they moved on from him, whether it was at Cincinnati or even at Wisconsin. He can coach. He can coach. I just question the direction of the program. I understand the move from Cincinnati to Wisconsin, but even at the time, I'm like, man, would I leave Cincinnati for Wisconsin? Like, if I was going to go to a Big Ten program, would it be Wisconsin, right? Because yeah, I guess tier 2 Big Ten program.
Fair. Yeah.
Tier 2. Was it tier 2 at the time he left? Went to Madison? Maybe he was tinkering on dropping to tier 3. Maybe at that point in time. But that's neither here nor there. He can have a catastrophic season. Like
And I think
if he fights to 6 wins and gets into a bowl, I think everybody objectively says, I don't know how he pulled that off. Like, yo, that's a great coaching job. But like the schedule you just laid out sounds like 3 wins. Sounds like 3 to 4 wins.
you gotta have a winning record. I mean, that's the reality, Shaun. And look,
Yeah.
I liked the Wisconsin move for him because a lot of making the right move is finding the right fit.
Right.
And when you look at Wisconsin, you're like, look, this is a place that can produce offensive linemen. This is a place that produces running backs. This is a place that produces good front seven. I mean, there's a lot of front seven players in the NFL from Wisconsin from the last decade. They've always been able to go down to Florida and Ohio and Texas and find those underrated skill players that can play corner and receiver. And it's just a place that you should be able to have success if you do it the right way. But he went to Wisconsin and he tried to go into this air raid Phil Longo offense. And it was just like that. I mean, I said at the time, you remember we had this conversation, Shaun. I said, I don't know what the heck he's thinking taking Wisconsin. You're not going to be able to recruit the athletes you need to recruit to run that offense at Wisconsin. Now he's trying to unring that bell, and I just don't know if he's capable of doing it. And I don't think that they gave him the schedule that he's capable of doing. People talk about, he's lost a starting quarterback each of the last 3 years. Well, you know what? Do a better job recruiting depth at quarterback. And if something keeps happening to you, maybe it's not bad luck. Maybe there's something that you're doing that's causing these issues to continue to pile up. So I think Luke Fickell seat gets warmer and warmer. It's okay right now. But, I mean, if you're a booster that has doubts about Luke Fickell, did you watch that win over Miami, Ohio, and you're like, fix them, we're good? Or do you think this is going to be a long year? If we're struggling to beat Miami of Ohio, this is going to be a long friggin' year with the schedule that we have. Because that's what I'm thinking if I'm a booster at Wisconsin or a decision maker at Wisconsin. You've got to at least look respectable this weekend against Bama. If you don't, it's going to get ugly for him. Last coach on, and this is right down, this is right up your alley. David Braun at Northwestern. Very interesting situation going on with David Braun at Northwestern. Obviously, we all remember how he got hired. We remember the situation with Pat Fitzgerald and the hazing, and he gets fired. David Braun is named who was hired, I think, that off season as the D coordinator, correct? He was hired to be the D coordinator, gets promoted to interim head coach because Pat Fitzgerald it wasn't in fall camp, was it? It was like right before the season started, if I remember correctly, or was it in fall camp?
It was that summer. Yeah. Okay. So coming out of spring, going into that summer.
Right before the season starts. Too late to have a coaching search. They promote David Braun to head coach. They go 8-5, and he gets named the head football coach. And it was a heck of a year for them. You know, obviously, Shaun, they had won their last 4 games of the season, and even some of their losses, like they were competitive in their losses. Their last 2 losses, they lost at Nebraska by 8 and lost to Iowa by 3. Beat Wisconsin on the road, beat Illinois on the road, beat Purdue, beat Utah in a bowl game. And it was really just a miraculous season for them. And then he comes out, did lose a game to Riley Leonard and Duke that season, it should be pointed out. Goes out the next year, last year, his first full year is like the guy, no more interim, and they go 4-8. They beat Miami of Ohio, beat Eastern Illinois, beat Maryland, beat Purdue. They lost an early game in overtime to Duke. I remember watching that game, and it was kind of like, that was a disappointing win or loss. You thought that maybe they could be more competitive. They got blown out by Washington. They got blown out by Indiana. You lost at home to a bad Wisconsin team by 20. Got blown out by Iowa. Got blown out by Ohio State. Got blown out by Michigan, and then lost by 10 to Illinois in the bowl game. And they weren't competitive. You come out in 2025, you lose the opener to Tulane, and not only lose, but lose by 20. You get Western Illinois at home, beat them 42-7. Now you got Oregon coming up. After that, you got UCLA at home, losing Monroe. The rest of their schedule, Shaun, into October, they play Monroe. Then it's at Penn State, home against Purdue, at Nebraska, at USC, home against Michigan, home against Minnesota, at Illinois. The loss to Tulane really hurts, in my opinion. Competitive loss. This weekend is a big game for them in that I expect them to lose and lose convincingly. But the way that Dan Lanning is, if he can beat you by 60, he's going to beat you by 60. You got to avoid that embarrassing loss, because if that happens, then what we're going to see is in a lot of these games, we're going to see more and more of it, and his seat's going to heat up big time. I personally think right now it's got to at least be a little bit warm, but this next month is going to tell us if it's going to get hot. What say you, Shaun? Because I know that's – and here's my justification. The new stadium opens next year, right? I don't want to go into a season in a brand new stadium where there's a lot of excitement in your program with a coach on the hot seat coming off of back-to-back losing seasons. I almost feel like just make the move, hire some coach that gets everybody energized, so at least you can have some energy going into year one in the new stadium. That's kind of where my thinking is on this. I know it's early, it's year 3, but sometimes you got to recognize pretty quickly that this guy's just not it. I'm not saying David Braun is that right now. I don't think we know. But I think this next couple months is going to certainly tell us. And I think that loss to Tulane, which we talked about on the show a couple weeks ago, would have me a little bit nervous. That team was inept in that game. It got dominated by Tulane. That's a concern.
It's quick for me. I think his success was because, if and you followed the story, the roster was not happy with the dismissal of Pat Fitzgerald. The complaints were primarily made by players who were formerly on the roster or really had no impact on the roster. And so, along with them being a senior-laden and veteran team, they played with a huge chip on their shoulder in that 8-5 season to play for Pat Fitzgerald as much as they played for Coach Braun. And so after that wore off, then it became more of his program. And I think he gets a little bit longer leash because people understand the situation that he was thrown into. Yeah, did he deserve to get the job? One could sit there and say, you still open it up to a national search after that. If you're honest about what was taking place, the right thing to do would have been, let's really open it up, because we do have this new stadium coming down, and we would much rather have a coach going into his second or third year, developing his program, rather than a guy coming in, taking over someone else's program, and we really don't know what he's about. He hasn't been through his exhaustive search. We really haven't dug into him, and we haven't had other people to compare him to. So you make a compelling point talking about wanting to have some hope in the program going into that new stadium. And once again, as long as it's not devastating, I do think he gets another year. I think next year would be the year that determines, who he really is for people up in Evanston. And there's so many other, the reason I say that is so many other things as a school that they're dealing with politically, that I really think the football program is kind of like skating under the radar. I really don't think it's being scrutinized as much as it would be if there were not, for some of the other major things that the university is dealing with right now.
The thing for me is it's not so much about football. If I'm at Northwestern, it's about money. And that's what it comes down to, is you've got to maximize your opportunities to make money. Follow-up question for you, Shaun. You said unless it's devastating. In your mind, tell me what that looks like. What devastating is? What is it? Record? Is it record plus how they lose? What is the devastating type of season that you think would lead to them saying, hey, we've got to make a change. We've got to do something different?
The way you lose. I think, like you said, the way you lose, right? If they're competitive and you watch players in the program, do they seem like they're giving up? Do they still like they're still playing hard? Like I said, they weren't playing hard for just Coach Braun. They were playing hard because they were upset that their coach was let go by the university. That was the chip on their shoulder. So now, you have to watch. And see, that's why I say, I don't know, with everything they have going on, outside of football at the university, I don't even know if they have the energy to really have somebody take a deep dive into the program and figure things out. I think they would really just say, man, let's just get into the new stadium. And if we have to let them go after 1 year, at least the stadium is part of the selling to the new coach. Right now, if someone becomes available that they feel like they can get, like a big time assistant by a surprise team or something like that, then they go get it. But like I said, with the legal issues and the money they're spending with that and the stadium, like, man, I'm sure the buyout won't be that much for Coach Brown, you know. But would they even want to spend that, you know, right now? There's a lot of different factors, man, a lot of moving parts. It really is. I think he gets another year. I'm not hearing anything, you know, coming out as far as being overly concerned, because they have bigger fish to fry right now at that school. So,
well, there we go, Shaun. We did have a super chat here from Raymond Horton. He says, hey, Bryan, can you put the link for Jason in the chat? Raymond, I did that when you asked. I do appreciate the super chat. Obviously, our guy Jason Smith, longtime member. I think he's been on the show for several years. A veteran who his dog was hit by a car recently, and it's a dog that's been with him through a lot of his trials after his service. Has helped him through a lot of times. Fortunately, the dog Jinx did survive. The problem is that there's a lot of medical costs that Jason's going to have a really hard time covering. And Shaun, you know this is near and dear to my heart because of what we went through the last couple of years with Rita. And believe me, I know how expensive that can be. But we want to try to help Jason out. He has got a GoFundMe going. I'm going to put the link again into the chat. I couldn't put the GoFundMe link because it's too big for the StreamYard chat to have. So what I've done is I am putting a link to my tweet about it, which has the link in the tweet. So I'm going to put that in the chat again. Look, I know that a lot of us are going through tough times financially, and we're not always in position to help out financially. If you're not, that's okay. Prayer, support. Jason really wants that and needs that. You can give that. But if you're willing and able to help out as much as you can, even if it's 100 people giving $5, $10, whatever the case may be, that certainly helps Jason out a ton. So I've donated on behalf of IB. Trevor also kicked in a little bit more. A lot of people have given it. I think so far, I think he's close to 50 donors. 50 donors so far. 50 different donors have given, and we greatly appreciate that. A lot of IB people have done that, so we really appreciate that. But look, this is kind of what we do at IB. We're a community, not just a place that talks football, and we want to help people out. We've done it in the past. We'll do it again. I don't love to go back to the well too many times for you guys because I know it can get taxing. But Jason's a very dear, I have a great amount of respect for Jason. Not only has he been with Irish Breakdown from the beginning as a fan, but he also is a veteran. And you guys know how I feel about veterans and the sacrifices they make and the things that they chose to do that a lot of us chose not to do, or people like me who don't necessarily have the courage to do what they do. So we appreciate you very much, and we want to be able to help those people. And especially since Jinx is not just a pet to Jason, but someone who has been very instrumental in him dealing with the things that he's had to deal with as a veteran and a disabled veteran. So, Jason, we appreciate you, man. We'll do what we can to help you out. I thank all of y'all that have given, and I appreciate all y'all that will give. We appreciate y'all a great deal. And we always say this is a community, and part of a community isn't just we talk ball, but we also step up and help each other out when that need is there. So I would greatly appreciate y'all for that. And Jason, we appreciate you very much, my man. So if you're able to, I put the link in there. You can also, if you're listening later and you don't see the link, you can go to my Twitter page at Coach D178. I have it on there. It's one of my more recent posts. There's a post if you're on the IB message board, there's a post on there that Jason explained his situation in more detail. So you can check that out as well. But Shaun, great show today, my man. Really enjoyed it. That was awesome stuff. Always love doing this with you. We'll be back next week for our RTCF. And obviously next time you'll see me and Shaun together will be tomorrow night after the game. We'll be doing the post-game show. Actually, will you be in town for the game tomorrow, Shaun?
No, I actually have a wedding tomorrow, so I have to be here in Chicago.
Okay, so you'll be part of the post game show. Great. So you'll see Shaun and I tomorrow night at some point in time for the post game show, and then he and I'll be back next Friday for our RTCF show. So big weekend. If you're on the message board, you're going to be looking for Shaun's updates after the visit this weekend. He's going to be talking to as many recruits as he can. Put some updates on the board. We appreciate you all very much. Have a great rest of your day. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell. Give us that 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. Tell people why IB is a place they need to listen to. And as always, best way to support what we do at Irish Breakdown is go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Join a membership. With a membership monthly, annual, you can join our booster club. You get some free merch in return if you join the booster club. But most importantly, cheer for old Notre Dame, folks. This is a big weekend for Notre Dame. If you're going to the game, be loud, be locked in, cheer this team on. You want them to battle for 4 quarters, then y'all need to battle for 4 quarters. And I'm very, very much looking forward to that. So have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you all again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.